All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Jane, could call the roll.
Regent Bartel? Here. Regent Baling? Present. Regent Bradley?
Here.
Regent Drew? Here. Regent Evers? Regent Falbo? Here. Regent Higgins?
Here.
Regent Rybar? Here. Regent Menedee? Here. Regent Milner? Here. Regent Pointer? Here. Regent Pruitt?
Here.
Regent Roberts? Regent Smith?
Here.
Regent Tyler?
Here.
Regent Vasquez?
Here.
Regent Walsh?
Here.
Regent Whitburn?
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you, Jane. The minutes of the February 2013 meeting have been distributed. May I have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Today we have another of our one-day meetings, of course, where we have the opportunity to discuss several significant issues in greater depth without the pressure to act on them today. The idea is, of course, to improve and inform our future decision-making. As you'll note in the agenda, our two major topics today include a closer look at our long-term more graduates plan to increase the number of UW graduates by 2025, as well as a discussion of the budget. Before we get started, brief report to share. And first, it's always good to share some good news. I'm pleased to report that Regent Tracy Rybar's appointment to the board was officially approved by the state legislature last week on a 33-0. Not all of us have always been unanimous. In other board news, one of our colleagues was honored just last month at the 2013 Wisconsin Manufacturer of the Year Awards. Regent Mark Tyler, president of OEM Fabricators, Inc. in Woodville, was named the Grand Award winner in the Workforce Development category. OEM Fabricators is a leading contract manufacturer known for large, complex welded and machined components for heavy industries such as railroads, oil and gas, construction, and mining equipment. The company also is involved with the manufacturers of medical devices, musical instruments, racing yachts, and aircraft machines. It's quite a variety there, Mark. OEM Fabricators team was recognized for continually exploring new ways to promote manufacturing opportunities and creating effective partnerships that advance manufacturing in Wisconsin. Congratulations, Mark. Brief update on the chancellor searches that are underway at UW-Madison and UW-Eau Claire. We have 4 finalists for UW-Madison and 4 finalists for UW-Eau Claire. In both cases, the searches are proceeding according to schedule, with those candidates making their campus visits this week and next. These visits provide a valuable opportunity for mutual getting to know both the campuses and the chancellor finalists. Next in the process, President Riley and UW-Eau Claire Special Regent Committee, led by Regent Menedee, will be interviewing the 4 Eau Claire candidates next Wednesday the 13th. Similarly, on Friday, March 15th, President Riley and UW-Madison Special Regent Committee, led by Regent Pruitt, will conduct the interviews of the 4 Madison candidates. Following those interviews, the President and the special committees are expected to reach a consensus on the respective preferred candidates, and those names will be submitted to the board for our approval. In both cases, those should occur at the meeting next month in La Crosse. Anytime we have new leaders, it's an exciting time for both the campuses involved and for the system as a whole. And I know all of us have been following those 2 processes, both at Eau Claire and Madison, with great interest. Finally, as we mentioned in the last month's meeting, we're continuing to engage in dialogue with the governor and the legislature regarding the budget and other matters. Some of that legislative activity in the last month. On February 13th, Regent Vice President Falbo appeared before the Senate Universities and Technical Colleges Committee, chaired by Senator Sheila Harsdorf, to brief the committee on the report of the Special Task Force on UW restructuring and operational flexibilities. As you know, Regent Falbo, who chaired that committee, provided an overview of the report and answered questions. On February 19th, UW Colleges and Extension Chancellor Ray Cross interim UW Extension Provost Aaron Brower and President Riley appeared before the same committee and shared an informational session about the UW flexible option. President Riley and Chancellor Cross updated committee members and answered questions regarding the status of operational flexibilities provided to the UW system in the budget. And President Riley also had an update regarding the HRS. Of course, last month, Governor Walker presented the 2013-15 state budget bill proposal, which included a lot of significant reinvestments in the UW system, and we'll be hearing a lot more about that this afternoon. If there isn't any further questions, we'll turn it over to you, President Riley, to start off.
Thank you. Thank you, President Smith, and good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. Our first topic today, as Brent indicated, takes a deep dive into the More Graduates leg of our strategic plan. As you'll recall, at the heart of the More Graduates initiative is a goal to produce a cumulative 80,000 more UW graduates by the year 2025, more than our normal trajectory would yield. During the past year, you've heard about different parts of the plan. Let me remind you about how we've kind of worked to come up to this presentation today on this topic. Last August, the board discussed the UW Systems Accountability Report, which measures, among many other things, how the system's institutions are doing in meeting their More Graduates goals. In October, the board heard an update on enrollments across the system. We learned that system-wide undergraduate enrollments for fall 2012-13 were the highest in more than a decade, and with that, about 2% behind our plan goals. In response, the board requested a deeper look at the More Graduates plan to see how we're tracking to meet our goals. As a backdrop to those discussions, last month, this board looked at the vital signs of the plan, our retention rates, our graduation rates, as well as achievement gaps. We also heard at our February meeting from Molly Corbett-Broad, the president of the American Council on Education, as we also heard from Molly then, accomplishing the completion agenda is a moral and strategic commitment we have to the country. We intend to keep it. To do that, we need your help and support, and that of all our fellow citizens who believe that educational opportunity is the path to prosperity and security for all of us. Today, we will have an opportunity to more fully discuss the More Graduates goals and also to investigate the threats to and opportunities for achieving those goals. So here to lead our discussion this morning is Senior Vice President Mark Ruff. Mark.
I love technology help. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to address you again. As Kevin pointed out, we have sort of been working through the pieces of our More Graduates plan, our growth agenda, and today is sort of the finale of the season. I guess that's in keeping with our dinner last night, celebrating the end of Downton Abbey for the year. So we're doing the same thing. It's also, I think, appropriate that the provosts were celebrated last night. Much of the work that we'll be talking about today really is impacted greatly and is led by them and the chancellors. But it lies in the academic arena of our institutions. With that, just a little outline. We're going to look at a little bit of a review of the progress on our goals, what those goals are. We'll take a look at some threats to achieving those goals and some opportunities to meet those goals. We're going to take a break about an hour from now. It'll take about an hour and 15 minutes to get through the first part. We'll take a break, and then we have three chancellors, Chancellor Debbie Ford, Dean Van Galen, and Ray Cross, that will be up for a panel in the second portion of this presentation. So we can get a look at how some of these goals are going on individual campuses and get the perspective from the institutions themselves. In looking at the More Graduate plans, the first real goal in there, the top goal is not just increasing the number of degrees we produce over the 2008-9 levels by approximately 80,000, but it's also to have higher quality degrees and to make sure that those students are better prepared for the economy that they're going to enter into. So it's not just more graduates, it's more better prepared graduates. And we'll then, after we look at that, we'll look at these other areas, including the retention rates, the graduation rates, and our equity gaps. To begin with then, how are we doing on the number of degrees? In this slide, you can see our trajectories, the black lines, in terms of the number of baccalaureate degrees that we're planning to produce. The top black line includes the baccalaureate degrees plus the associate degrees. And we're on track. We're making good progress. In fact, we're ahead of the game. We've produced about 1,000 more degrees, almost 1,100 more degrees than our trajectory calls for. That's about a 30% overage. So we're really in good shape in terms of meeting the goal of producing those graduates. Now, are they better prepared? That's a little bit harder to address, and we've got a lot of markers for that. But there is one that I want to draw your attention to, and that is, where are our students getting their degrees? In what fields are they getting their degrees? This slide lets us look at not where they're getting their degrees, but it's an average over the last 5 years of how the number of degrees awarded in a particular area has changed. And so what's plotted here is the average number of new degrees in each discipline. So if you look at the business managing marketing up here, what you'll see is that every year for the last 5 years, they've added approximately 140 more graduates in that field than they did 5 years ago. So every year they're adding about 140 more graduates. What you'll notice if you look at this chart is that where we're adding more graduates, where we're really turning the numbers up, is in business, science, the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and healthcare. If you go down the list, it's business, health professions, engineering, biological, biomedical sciences, agriculture and related sciences, computer information, sciences and support. The red bars show those fields where the number of degrees is backing off. And those down here, family and consumer science, education, communication, and the social sciences. So we're seeing increases in the area that we are hoping our Wisconsin economy will grow, that we know the U.S. economy is growing. We're backing off on a few others where, in the case of education, especially elementary, we were producing more than we had jobs for. So we are getting out graduates, producing more graduates in fields where our economy needs those graduates. Well, let's look at the success rates then. So beyond just getting more graduates out and getting them into the right fields, what can we say about how we're doing in terms of our efficiency, getting students through, the students that come to us, how well are we doing with them? In terms of second-year retention rate, we're really on track. We're about 0.3 of a percentage point behind the goal. We're at 80.2, and we were expecting to be or hoping to be at 80.5. We've been following this goal pretty closely. You'll notice, though, that the trajectory we have out there doesn't increase sharply. Retention rates, number one, are somewhat difficult to move, but we are moving them. We're moving them forward. We're also already into pretty rare air. This 80% retention rate nationally is very high. You'll see a little bit later that when we look at retention rates and graduation rates, one of the areas that we're really kind of leading the country as a system is in this retention rate. We're above the national average by a percentage point. The rest is at 79. But that only looks at four-year institutions, and we include two-year institutions in ours. So we're really doing much better than the national average. And we're on track and looking to continue to grow that number. By 2025, we hope to be at 84%. In our graduation rates, 4- and 6-year graduation rates, again, we're largely on track, meeting our targets, and we're seeing nice growth in both the 6-year graduation rate and the 4-year graduation rate. Currently, we have a 4-year graduation rate of about 29%. We were hoping to be at 28%, so we're above that. I am going to return to the 4-year graduation rate a little bit later in this presentation and talk about the possibility of changing that number a little bit more rapidly. I think there's some efficiencies that we can find there. But compared to the averages, the national averages, especially in 6-year graduation rate, we're about 2 percentage points above the 6-year graduation rate nationally. We also want to take a look at and keep track of how our students do, how they progress through our institutions. And we look at both the new freshmen and our transfer students. And the new freshmen are about 45% of our new freshmen that graduate. 45% of the new freshmen that graduate are still enrolled. do so in 4 years. So about half. When we look at the new transfer students, it's about 55% of those graduate. It's higher than that. So 80% graduate in 4 years. Of those that graduate, 80% graduate in 4 years. Okay? Now you have to be careful with the transfer students because they're bringing credits in. All right, and we're measuring this 4 years from the time they matriculate, from the time they transfer, not from the time they first started getting their education. So you do expect that number to be quite a little bit higher. In general, then, when a new student starts with us, whether they're a freshman or a transfer student, in general, about 54% of the students are going to graduate that end up graduating, are going to do so in 4 years. So it's still the dominant, more of our students graduate in 4 years than in 5 or in 6. How important are transfer students to us? We haven't really looked at these transfer students very closely. I want to give you a chance to see this just a little bit. 2/3 of our students who graduate, so this is a look at a graduating class, of 2011 and 12.
Could you just
Sure.
back to the previous slide?
Sure.
You just said the majority of our grads graduate in 4 years.
Of the ones that graduate, yeah, the majority graduate in 4 years.
And what percentage of all students would that be?
Of the students that start graduate in 4 years, well, here, this is the easier way to, this is just new freshmen, right? And for new freshmen, it doesn't include the transfer students. The graduation rate right now is at 29% of new freshmen. For the transfer students, I don't have that number in front of me, but it is significantly higher for the students transferring in because
And it
they're
would vary a lot across the campus.
It varies a lot across the campuses, yes. Yeah. Madison's 4-year graduation rate, I believe, is 48%, and it's the highest of them. Yeah. Other questions? Yes, Mark.
Slide 5 was where you showed the programs in the red.
Yeah.
That's not to suggest that we are not going to be graduating enough to fill the jobs that are available in those areas.
No, it's not. And in fact, one of these areas, the social sciences in particular, is one of the largest areas that we grant degrees in. There's a large number in there. So this is the important thing about this is this is the rate at which they're cutting back or increasing the number. It isn't necessarily how many we're actually producing. So it shows us where we've got some growth, and it shows where we've got some retraction. Yeah.
Are those results due to anything that we're doing, or are those just student choices?
It's a little bit of both. Thanks for that question. Some of it is student choices, but if you look at where we've been adding programs over the last 5 years, 10 years, it's been in the STEM fields, it's been in business, there's been more program additions in those areas, and where we have taken, where our institutions have scaled back on a program or two, they've been more in the social sciences, education, those areas. Yeah. Yes, Chuck.
Mark, as you mentioned retention rates at 80% with the goal to go to 84%. And you may be getting to this, but how concerned are you as the pool broadens and as we educate more people and hopefully attract people who aren't the most traditional students, how concerned are you about both even just holding an 80% retention rate, not to mention increasing it by 4 points?
Yeah, that's a really great issue. If we expand the pool into students who are coming out less academically prepared, if we were to do that, holding that retention rate gets more and more difficult. However, we also, our campuses are very good at turning up how they handle those students. Now, that's not easy to do. It takes a lot of work, and it takes some investment, some resources. But all of our plans have, all the institutions have plans to address that, how to move forward, how to keep doing this. They are going to have to be funded, and we are going to have the resources to continue to grow those programs to support the different students. And in particular, the group that's having the most trouble right now are those students that are Pell eligible, our low-income students, more than any others. Yes, Jose?
At some point, will you be also giving us information on students of color and color at risk?
Yep. Yeah, especially in terms of their enrollments. Things. Yeah. Jerry?
Back to the freshmen, what percentage are accessing one or more remediation programs?
Across the campus, I don't know the number off the top of my head. Heather, do you know the number?
Across the system, around 2024, around that remediation, and going back to your question earlier about four-year graduation rate, about 45% of all students graduate in 4 years. For new freshmen, about 29%, and for transfer, about 55%.
Other questions?
So, Mark, is there statistics now for the retention rate for what non-traditional students versus, lack of a better term, traditional students?
Yes.
Is there? I mean, you said addressed it broadly, but are we seeing that is a different rate?
Yeah, I want to be careful about the non-traditional students.
Yeah.
When we talk about non-traditional, when we look at our retention rates, this is for new entering freshmen.
Right.
Right? So we haven't got the retention rate for the non-traditional students up here, meaning those students who don't come to us right out of high school.
Yep.
They're older than 24. Most of them have families. We're tracking those rates. We watch those rates. But you're right. Those are much lower. It's much more difficult to get those students to stay in. They've got other obligations in their life. When we look at this traditional student that's coming in, that 18 to 19-year-old, pretty much fresh out of high school, we do look at them also very closely in terms of race and ethnicity, how they do in their retention rates, how they do in their success rates. And there is a difference between the retention rates of students of color. There's amongst those that are Pell eligible and not Pell eligible. That's also true in their 4-year graduation rates and their 6-year graduation rates. And so we are actively working to try to move those up. And that's the point of closing the equity gaps, trying to bring those retention rates, those 4-year graduation rates and those 6-year graduation rates for the underrepresented minority student, the low-income student, up so that they're on par even with those traditional white students at our campuses.
Just a point that I think the questions that I'm hearing the Regents ask and Mark's answers is getting to, which is that when it comes to graduation rates and time to degree, there really is no absolute good here. It's a balanced test, I believe. That is, it would be easy to get retention and graduates higher by just accepting only the kids who come from the wealthiest high schools and have the highest averages coming out of those high schools. If we are indeed going to broaden the base of educated folks and have many more working adult students in, the average time to degree is going to go up. It's not going to go down. I think we've made the decision, haven't we, that we want those working adult students here. So we have to be clear that you know, this is a relative good, and there are a number of relative goods we're trying to balance off against each other in the interest of the wider society and the future of everybody in it.
But we're also hearing, at our last meeting, we heard change the major, add a year. So there's a personal responsibility, a student organization, a family emphasis that can help. In follow-up to your answer to my question, 44%, if you control for the Madison campus, what would it be?
I don't have that number right off my head, but I can get that to you.
Okay. All right. Again, about 2/3 of our students are traditional students. That is, of our graduates that are coming in, 2/3 of the students that graduate came in as freshmen. Another third came in basically as transfer students. This little 3% other entry, some students come in as special students. They're not fully admitted. They take a few courses. They're special admits and then eventually become fully admitted. So they came in through sort of the side door, so to speak. Amongst our transfer students, it's important to realize that amongst them, about 1/3 of the transfer students come from another UW institution, whether it's the colleges or another 4-year, and another approximately 1/3 come from outside of Wisconsin. They're coming from Minnesota, Michigan, Illinois, one of the other states. And then the tech colleges, about 6% of our overall number of graduates comes from them. Transfer from the Wisconsin private institutions is really quite small. Yeah, Mike?
We hear a lot of times about the graduation rate in the two-year colleges and how low it is. What impact does transfers, there could be a chunk of the people that are not finishing at the two-year colleges that go on to a successful completion. Do we know that number?
I think I'll have Ray talk about that a little bit later. I don't know, it's part of his presentation for sure.
My point is that the graduation rate at the colleges is impaired by some positive outcomes that we don't see.
Exactly, and that's especially true at the technical colleges. There's many of those students that will leave before they finish their certificate or get their Associate of Science and Arts degree because they've got a job, and so they're in a good shape. Within the colleges, what we do find is that those students that transfer to us, whether they transfer from a college or they transfer from one of our UW four-year institutions, their success rates on our campuses are the same once they transfer.
But right? you count them as four-year graduates, which they're really not in total.
That's correct. We're counting them from the time they come to that institution. Tracking them back further is really difficult, so we follow them from the time they enter the institution. Yeah. And one of the reasons we set it at 4 years and we don't look at the 2 or the 3 is there's a wide range in how many credits those students transfer in. So some of them transfer in as few as 12. Some of them are transferring in over 70. So whether, kind of watching this 2-year graduation rate or 3-year graduation rate is a little bit difficult. There's an error bar there based on how many credits they're bringing in.
Mark, can you go back to that previous slide? The 10% from outside Wisconsin?
Yeah.
I imagine they have a faster time to degree because they're paying more, but are they primarily in a certain part of the state? Or?
We have to be careful with that group because some of those are Wisconsin residents that went to the University of Minnesota or Illinois and then are coming back. Right. Some of them, though, are exactly as you said. They're out-of-state students that have finally wisened up enough to come and get their education at the best university in the world. Yeah. But they will pay a little bit more.
Well, but they're also
so they will graduate faster. Yeah. Yep. We see that in the freshman population as well. If they're from out of state and they're paying the full out-of-state rate, their graduation rates are higher.
What percent of that whole circle is out-of-state students? Recipients.
I'm not sure because this is of the graduates.
Right.
This is of the graduates. I don't know that percentage. Heather, do you know the percentage of our graduates that are out-of-state students? When we do look at how students do from looking a little bit at where they came from as they transfer, so focusing on these transfer students just a little bit, when they transfer in, we follow them from where they came from. What we find is that those students that came from one of our UW institutions, whether it's a 4-year or a 2-year, have about the same 4-year, 5-year, and 6-year graduation rates. And if they didn't graduate, they're about equally likely to stay on, whether they came from one of the 4 years or the 2 years. The tech colleges are down a little bit, and actually significantly. And the other institutions, these again would be the privates, the Wisconsin privates, plus the out-of-state institutions. They're down somewhat 5 percentage points from those students that are within our system. A lot of that can be attributed to simply knowing how the system works because our colleges and our 4-year institutions do have a lot of similar structures in place and just knowing how to navigate that system. Some of the tech college has to do with the preparation level and making sure that the students have all the courses that they need when they're coming in and they're at a significant level, sufficient level to be able to transfer in effectively and move into the next series of courses. Our undergraduate enrollment headcounts is in October when we had the presentation on enrollments. This was the slide that caught people's attention. Actually, it was a different slide that included our graduate enrollments as well. And our graduate enrollments this past year have been down significantly. And a lot of that has to do, almost all of it is in our education fields. The change in the teachers out there and their ability to move up in pay scale based simply on increasing their credentials changed the nature of student applicants and the number of students we had enrolled in our graduate education programs. When we look just at the undergraduate enrollments, which is the heart and soul of the More Graduates plan, we see we are down about 2%. I want to look at that just a little bit more, and we'll look at that as one of the threats we have out there that we've already discussed in the past, is our Wisconsin demographics. But when you look at these enrollments, who's enrolled, and you look at the racial and ethnic makeup of the students that are coming to us, this is our total undergraduate enrollment, and you can see the different racial and ethnic groups in here. What I want you to notice is, first of all, that the Hispanic population and the Southeast Asian population is growing pretty rapidly. This orange line that starts in 2008 is a population known as 2 or more races. And until 2007 or 8, we didn't collect that information. They had to select which race they wanted to be in, and they picked one. Now, there's a little bit of a caveat on here. If you select Hispanic first and then select 2 or more races, you're Hispanic. If you select Native American and select 2 or more races, you're 2 more races. There's a privileging of the Hispanic race, and that's the federal definition. So we go to, if you select Hispanic, you're Hispanic. Some of what you're seeing in the Native American population turning off, or going down, is this a larger portion of them selecting 2 or more races. It's also true of the other Asian population, that they're being impacted by this ability to select 2 or more races. When you look, however, at how these students do in terms of finishing their degrees, look at the African American population, the blue line at the top. It runs just under 3%. When you look at their graduation rates, they're running under 2%. So they're not, the portion of our students who are graduating isn't in proportion to our enrollment when it comes to African American students. If you look at that for all of these racial and ethnic groups, you'll find one that holds its own. That is, that the proportion of students graduating is equal to the proportion of students enrolled. And that's the other Asian students, not the Southeast Asian, but the other Asian students. The Hispanics are below, the African Americans are below, the Native Americans are below, the Southeast Asians are below. So and that's not news to us. We know that the graduation rates of those racial and ethnic groups is not as high as it is for our white population or for the Asian population. Sure.
For perspective, Madison campus, current minority enrollment, 10, 12%, I think it's 12.
Paul, do you know your minority enrollment?
Yeah, one more time.
Well, the minority undergraduate enrollment at Madison?
About 15 to 16%.
Yeah, 15 to 16. Yeah.
So the multi-year completion rate, 5 years out, Madison, 75% would be much, much lower for our minorities on the Madison campus.
It's lower, but it's not dramatic. It's closing fast.
Yeah, the gap on the Madison campus is pretty small right now in terms of the 6-year graduation rate. Yeah. Other questions? Let's look at some of the threats then. We're doing okay with our numbers, but we've got to look at some of our threats and find out whether or not we can make our goals. So within the threats, I'm going to talk a little bit about salaries. I won't talk much about retirements and resignations, except to point out that on many of our campuses, we are seeing the highest level of retirements in the last few years. It's a little hard to document all of that. But I think if you want to hear a little bit more about that, some of our provosts in particular can talk about retirement rates and some of these retention rates and some of the unique stories that they're hearing from their campuses about people who are leaving, somewhat because of salaries, but also because of other things in their lives. In addition to threats to our quality, that is being able to keep the faculty that we need, the staff that we need, we do have some threats to hitting the quantity. The sheer number of graduates we want to produce. So we'll look at these high school demographics and we'll look at financial aid. The state economy is another threat. I'm not going to spend any real time with it, but the point with the state economy is that If we don't have an economy that has the jobs for these graduates, then it isn't going to matter, because we may graduate them, but they're going to go out of state for jobs. So the economy will impact the real result we're after, and that's improving the the percentage of our adults who have a degree beyond post-secondary, beyond high school. And if we don't have the jobs for them, we'll have a problem with that. Mike?
Just one point.
Sure.
That's a two-way street.
It absolutely
Are
is.
we producing the graduates that there are jobs for?
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Absolutely a two-way street. But the state's economy impacts that. What we put out impacts that. So, but like I said, that's a sticky problem. There's a lot of things you just can't get your hands around. I will address then salaries, the high school demographics, and financial aid. With salaries, one of the things that we know that we're about 18% behind. What I wanted to look at is how's the rest of the state doing? And in this data that was taken from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, it was part of an NCHEMS presentation that was made to the board a couple of years ago. What we see is that the state economy runs about, the per capita income, runs about 5 percentage points below the nation. So on average, you could say our salaries are running about 5% behind national averages across the economy. And that's impacted a little bit about the economic mix, what business sectors do we have, those sorts of things. But in general, people are about 5% behind the national average. When we look at salaries, what's happened to our salaries? And this happens to be just a snapshot of the comprehensive universities' full professors. They've been around long enough so that we can watch what's happened. But what we see is that from 1990 to about 2004, they were clipping along about 5 percentage points below their peer comparisons. But since that time, since 2004, we've really seen a degradation of faculty salaries compared to their peers. So as in the state of Wisconsin, the salaries, the per capita income has held flat over that period, about 5 percentage points below the national average. Faculty salaries have deteriorated to 18%. And it is impacting our ability to hire, to recruit and hire new faculty, and there are faculty that are leaving because of pay issues. Questions on salaries before we turn to enrollments? Some of the threats to our enrollment. All right. Looking next at enrollments, again, a slide we saw last October, and what's happening to the number of high school kids, the kids coming out of high school. So what's the graduation rate? And back here in the 90s, we had a big hole that opened up, and then we grew. The number of students coming out of our high schools was increasing, and it reached a peak in about 2007, and it's predicted to continue to go down until about 2015, and then recover relatively slowly, but never get back to that 2007 point. So what's the impact on our enrollments? What we see when we look at freshmen coming to the UW system. So these are new Wisconsin residents, freshmen. What we see is that from 2007 to 2012, we have fallen off significantly in terms of the number of new freshmen. It's a drop in head count of about 7%, and a drop in FTE, full-time equivalent students, of a little over 6%. So it is a significant drop. And if we don't do something to either fill in that gap or to bring up the percentage of Wisconsin students we bring in, we are going to have trouble meeting our goals. This is a significant threat. Mark?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the data here, and I'm going from memory on DPI information. And today there's about 70,000 high school seniors. 10 years out, there's about 60,000 high school seniors, and we're graduating at a rate somewhere around 90%. So we're really looking at maybe 64,000. But the chart doesn't line up with me. The drop-off seems more severe based on DPI data than what I see here.
Yeah, there's one is, I think, the enrollment of seniors, and the other is the projections of one part of it is actual graduates. I don't have the DPI data in front of me. Mike, do you have it? Are you familiar with it? We can take a look at it. We can.
Yeah, it's just, I guess the concern I've got is that, spent a lot of time in this area, and it looks, from what I'm accustomed to looking at, it looks more severe than than what I see here.
Yeah, and in this particular chart, the predictions on out into the future are based partly on those numbers of students enrolled back to 9th grade, 8th grade, all the way back to kindergarten, so you can project out how many you've got coming. But it also depends on then what they're predicting for either move-in or move-out rates, so sort of the in-migration, out-migration of the state, and then making some prediction also about those graduation rates and progress rates. What's the likelihood that, what percentage of the 8th graders are actually going to follow through and become seniors? So the predictions include more than just the number of seniors, but we can take a look at it. If it stays down longer than 2015, this becomes harder and harder to solve. Yeah. Mike?
What's our percentage of resident high school graduates that enroll?
31, it stays between 30 and 32%.
So it's pretty straight line?
It's extremely flat. You'll see that in just a little bit.
Oh, okay. I thought I might be your straight man on that.
Yeah, I just need 3 more slides before I'm there, so you're early. Other questions? Yeah, sure.
What's the national, how does Wisconsin compare in terms of these demographic trends to the national picture? Are we an outlier or
No, the 30%, if I remember right, is a little bit above the national average. The 30% come to the UW system is a little bit above the national average.
I just meant on the demographic trends in terms of the declining number of...
This is a northern states issue. So if you kind of draw a line across the northern third of the country, you'll see this in almost all of the states. There's a few on the East Coast where that's not true. But this is true, and I was surprised when I came here from Minnesota. You can lay this right over Minnesota's graph. You have to adjust it just a little bit up or down, but the contours are exactly the same. Michigan, Illinois is looking similar. Iowa, they all show the same sorts of trends.
But different trend in the Southwest or the South?
Very different trend in Texas, California, the Southwest. Yep. The Deep South is facing some of these similar trends.
We have 180,000 students. What do the privates have? What's our footprint?
They're about, I believe the privates are at 60,000. They're about a third the size.
And are we able to track their role versus our role in the declining high school population?
We haven't ever done that. It is something that's been of interest for me. Tracking that means getting data from them. We just haven't pursued that in the past. They have grown, their population has grown quicker than ours in percentage terms, but in terms of number of students, we've grown at the same rate. So as we have grown our population, we've grown by the same number that the privates have. Of course, that's a bigger percentage for them. Yes, good.
With regard to the privates, I was wondering, I noticed that the percentage of transfer students is very small.
Yes.
Does that have anything to do with the difficulty of transfer credits and there not being because between our colleges and our tech schools, of course, and we're working on that, a nice transition.
There's a good
but
transition.
Anecdotally, I've heard that once you go private, you're stuck private because it's very hard to come. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah.
I'm asking you that.
Having taught a little bit at a private way back, one of the problems, many of the general education requirements within the privates, some of those, and in this state it's true, there are some religious components. So the requirement of a religion class, something that's not going to come over easily. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Many of the students that start at privates really do intend to graduate from there. They're making a commitment to go where mom and dad went. They're making a commitment to go to that particular liberal arts institution. There's a much bigger affinity class in the privates than there is in the publics. They just don't transfer out. And that's true across all states. It's not unique to Wisconsin. Other questions? Turning to financial aid, another threat. So we do have a problem to worry about with the enrollments, especially since the number of students coming out of Wisconsin is declining. We also have to worry about financial aid. And a couple key points. In this slide, what we see is that the average need, this is per student, so take a student that has financial need, so they file their FAFSA, it turns out that they've got a financial need. That percentage, that real dollars of need is increasing rather significantly. It's increasing for two reasons. It's not just our tuition that's increasing, which is true. It has been increasing. That's part of the puzzle. But the other part is that when you look at those students with need, they have a smaller and smaller financial capability to pay their own way. So even if you held the tuition level the same, what we're seeing is there are more students with need, and the need that they have as a single student is higher. So we're seeing a bigger and bigger split. We're seeing to put it in really plain terms, a poorer and poorer student body. Okay? More financially challenged student body as they came in. We saw that last time in terms of the percentage of our students who were eligible for Pell Grants. That's grown significantly in the last 10 years. Okay. Yes, Mark?
And yet, without them, we will never hit our goal.
And without them, we will never improve the economy of the state. If we don't get the people in the lowest income level to earn a degree, to be able to be active in the growing knowledge economy, we cannot pull this economy up. We can't bring up our average standard of living. We have to have more of everybody involved in the professional economy, in the knowledge economy, in the high-tech economy. And that means getting them degrees. And that's the sort of the moral imperative that the whole growth agenda and the more graduates is built around. If we don't get everybody, regardless of race, regardless of financial background, income levels, we not only need to get them in, provide the access, we've got to make sure they're successful when they get here. Mark?
Does this chart represent the tuition or direct educational unmet need, or does this address the entire
It's the entire unmet need.
Okay, so we're talking about housing or...
Housing and food, yeah, travel, books.
So is this an annual number, or is this
Annual.
This is an annual number?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that gets kind of scary when you see that the average unmet need is now about $9,000. And that's without loans. You throw the loans in. But that's part of the reason the loan debt's growing, as we talked about a few months ago. Yes.
Of course, the steep curve at the end represents tuition increases. Because we're causing more people to have more unmet need because we keep increasing the cost of their cost of education.
Only partly. Some of that's true, but some of it's also the case that we've got more and more students coming in with higher financial need. In other words, less financial resources. So you can't point at this and just see the tuition, right? You also have to realize that there's a lot of pieces in here, and one of those pieces is the fact that we're reaching into more and more of the population with limited financial resources.
So what are we doing? That's a good thing.
That's a great thing.
What are we doing that is making us do such a good job of convincing people who historically haven't thought about college education to say, hey, I really should think about college education? Is that something that's just happening, or is it something that the university is doing to recruit, or where's it coming from?
Some of it's the availability of financial aid, but I think the biggest piece of it is simply the national culture, this growing awareness that if you don't have an education beyond high school, you're never going to move out of the lower echelons of the financial picture of our country, and you've got to have the degree. And so there's this growing awareness, and this trend actually of more and more students from low income levels coming to our institutions. You can trace back to the 1960s. It's continued to come up. We're seeing it impacting us more and more.
And yet, we're not seeing large increases in the number of traditionally underrepresented minority students who are making that decision.
We are seeing increases there as well amongst the underrepresented minorities. We have moved from we've moved up about 5 percentage points in the last decade, I believe, in terms of the percentage of our population, of our student body, that is underrepresented minority.
And since we're talking about demographics,
sure.
As we move forward, how are the racial demographics of our graduates in Wisconsin than it should?
The high school graduates or the college graduates?
High school graduates, people who we're looking to recruit to come in to meet our goal.
Yeah. What we're seeing is that the African American population is holding relatively flat. It's the Hispanic population and the Southeast Asian, but especially the Hispanic population that's growing rapidly as a percentage of the students graduating from high school, right? But if you look at and that's also true of the population in general. The Hispanic population is growing quite rapidly. The African American population is flat, and the Southeast Asian population is growing slower than the Hispanic population. Yeah. So we need to be able to address those racial and ethnic groups, be able to provide good access, and also be able to provide programs then so that they're successful.
Thank you.
Mark, just another quick response to Regent Higgins' question about, are we doing anything to expand that population? A couple of years ago, we were part of a campaign called Know How to Go, which was put together by ACE, the Ad Council, and universities around the country. And with the help of the Ad Council, there were commercials for TV, for radio, for social media put together that were aimed at the kids themselves. And I remember being at an initial screening of these ads when the ad firm that had worked on them came in and showed them to a bunch of university presidents, and they were loud, they were edgy, there was rap music, there were quick cuts. It was a Sunday morning in Los Angeles at the conference, and when they turned the lights up, you could see these college presidents kind of, their eyes glazed over, and the fellow who was there from the ad agency who had put the commercial together said, "I see you don't have much of a reaction to this." And he said, "Good, because it's not aimed at you." And I think that's part of the point. The message really needs to go out in that case about if you don't have parents who have gone to college, there are things you need to know to do, and you need to start doing them at a certain point, or else you won't get there. You've got to know how to go. So I think that's just one example of what one thing we've been involved in to help with that, but I think it's an ongoing challenge to get the message out. And we've had, as you said, some success with it. I think we need to keep pressing and have more.
Jim.
This is a bit of a ricochet from what Mark's making a presentation about, but since 1998, the Alumni Club for Madison in the Fox Valley has had a among student recruitment program in which we brought kids down, and we bring about 100 kids from the Fox Valley, Oshkosh area each year to Madison, and they hear about financial, social, and academic support that they get on campus, and they do the know how to go kind of a thing. What we have challenges we've encountered over the last few years have to do with the fact that as we reduce investment in higher education, especially on the Madison campus, the one area that we haven't been challenged in is admissions. The numbers keep going up, the scores keep going up, and so we haven't put more money into our admissions office. And yet, as we move forward, I think that as we try to attract these underrepresented minority students who are becoming a larger and larger target group for us, we're going to have to talk about putting some resources into our admissions offices so that they can do a better job of recruitment than they're able to do now because of the financial constraints.
Other questions? So those are the threats that we're facing with salaries, retirement, real threats to the quality. Are we going to be able to put out the high quality degrees that we are now? We have some threats then to being able to meet the numbers in terms of our demographics, our economy, financial aid. So it might look bad. It might look like we can't make these goals. So let's look at some of the opportunities that we have. And again, I'll talk about the ones in particular that are highlighted in blue here. Increasing our enrollments in traditional students, also increasing non-resident students and how that might help. We do have things that we can do with the transfer students, increasing the number there, moving them through a little bit more quickly. And the flex option, we've heard a lot about it. It's continuing to build. We know that there's a place that we can get not only more students, it's a new market, it's that adult market, and in particular those adult students with some credits, with some experience that's applicable to education. And we will be able to produce more graduates out of that. We've had a lot of presentations, so I'm going to let that hold. And then in terms of efficiencies, I do want to spend some time focusing on our full-year graduation rate. So first, looking at some of the questions that we've already had. What's happening with our immediate new freshmen by race? So this is enrollment. The number of Wisconsin kids, students, that just graduated from high school who now come to one of our UW institutions. Someone asked me, what percentage of those students come here? It's 31%. That's this black line. And I said it's been pretty flat, and you can see it's extremely flat. It's within a percentage point one way or the other, year after year after year. And where we see growth, again, the purple line, Hispanic and Latino students. The red line, Native American students. That's actually been a surprise to a lot of people that the percentage of those kids graduating from high school is going up. Many of our tribes have put together education directors and are working aggressively to get their students to go on to college. They're working with us to make sure that once they come to the university, we're successful in graduating them, and we're working on that. You can see, as I've mentioned, this African American line holds really flat at 15%. All right? So what that says is that 15% of the African American students that graduate from graduate from high school, come to one of the UW system institutions. Only 15%. So it's half of the average at 31. Okay? So that's where we've got some room, some places that we can make up some ground, is looking at these non-traditional markets. So let's look at them just a little bit more closely. So if we look at the makeup of our freshman class, so what percentage of our freshman class is made up of these different racial and ethnic groups? And now you can really see the growth here. In the Hispanic and the Southeast Asian populations. The Hispanic is the purple line, and the Southeast Asian is the light green. We do see some declines, and this is where things get a little interesting. Look at the Native American line. All right? It's declining slightly. Some of that's being eaten up because some of those students are choosing to refer to themselves as two or more races instead of just Native American. So some of those two or more races are native, used to be recording themselves as Native American. But population of the percentage of kids, Native American students who are graduating from high school that come to us is increasing. But they're a smaller piece of our freshman class. They're a smaller piece of our freshman class. Right? We're getting more, but not at the rate the rest of our population is increasing.
Mark?
Yes?
What do we know about those that are not coming to the UW? And you said 15%. Are they going to privates? Are they going to technical colleges?
That's a really hard question to answer.
What's happening to them?
We don't know. We know that their participation rates in higher education are lower than white students. But I don't know whether or not we're getting our share of the Hispanic students. What we can see is, if you look at some of these, I'd have to go back too far, but if you look at the way the population is of Wisconsin high school graduates is going, the Hispanics, we're following that and staying parallel. So we're getting about the same percentage of them. What was happening 10 years ago, the percentage of them going to, that particular group going to a private school or a tech college or coming to the UW system, we've paralleled that. But what the percentage was before, I'm not sure. We do know that a high rate of the underrepresented minorities, especially African American and Hispanic, they have much higher enrollment rates in our tech colleges and our two-year colleges, but especially the tech colleges, than in the four-year institutions.
I guess where I'm going with it is, I would like to see more of all our racial ethnic minorities coming to the public institutions because of the earlier slide, which has to do with financial aid and loans and grants. And my belief is that going to those privates, they're going to come out with a bigger debt load than if they came to one of our institutions. So if there's any way we can do to increase that number to come to a public institution, I think from an economic point of view, it's got to be a lot better for them than immediately going to a private. It is.
And you've just made the point I really want to make out of this. This is an opportunity. These are students. We've got we don't have many of them coming to our campus. The total underrepresented minority population in the UW system is 15%. Their participation rates coming out of high school isn't as good as the average, or as our white students or other Asian students. And so we do need to work on these minority classes and be able to increase those. We've known that. We've been working on it for 2 decades, and it has been increasing for those 2 decades. The other thing that I think is a real opportunity here is the flatness of the average. That we've stayed at 30%, 31% for a long time. We've got a market share we can take on. We can get 31, 32%. And quite frankly, just going to 32%, going up 2 percentage points, will close that freshman hole. It doesn't take much because it's a big group. We have to do that without coming down into the quality. We need to take a bigger share of that top 50%, which is where we draw almost all of the students that come. So we do want to continue to focus on high-quality students, not just take them in because they happen to be a Wisconsin student. Make sure they're ready to come to our institution, make sure they're ready to be successful, but get a bigger market of those students who are successful. No?
Mark, one of the disturbing trends is the African American participation rates and graduation rates. And each underrepresented minority has its own particular, history and reasons. I wonder, obviously one of the things is the increasing unmet financial needs, impacts all of them. But I'm just wondering, what's your perspective in terms of why the African American rate is, sort of staying flat and decreasing, whereas Hispanic and Southeast Asian is going up. And I wonder if you see that as having any particular relation to the historical experience of African Americans in this country and the education debt, if you will, that we owe to African Americans, along with what we owe to other underrepresented minorities. So if you see that as playing into that, and also, are there any particular strategies that are used to, try to address the African American situation in particular?
Yeah, a couple comments. Number one, if you separate the African American students by gender, you see 2 very different things. African American female participation rates and graduation rates are climbing. They're soaring countrywide, nationwide. It's the African American males that we have problems with. Getting them to school, getting them to stay in school. And it's an issue that is on a lot of people's minds and is talked about and is worked on heavily. I was at a meeting last night. It's a school group. It's known as Avid Tops. It's a partnership between the Madison School District and the Boys and Girls Club in the area. And they have a laser focus on working with especially minority and low-income students, but a real focus on both African American and Hispanic males and making sure that they get them into the programs and that they're moving those through. We do have an issue, and each of our institutions is working on how they approach that. One of the institutions in particular has reached out to Milwaukee and puts a recruiter down there and gets into their school systems, meets directly with their parents. Is recruiting an African American student, they found you've got to get to know mom, you've got to get to know the minister, the pastor. That's the way you recruit in the African American community in Milwaukee in particular is what they're finding. They're doing this also in Chicago and have special programs with isolated schools. Stevens Point works closely with Lane Tech High School in Chicago, doing exactly that, working specifically, focusing in, working with religious leaders in that community in and around the school, especially of those students that they're trying to recruit.
Mark, are we also doing that with the private choice and charter schools, or are we only focused on the public schools?
I have to turn to my chancellor colleagues. Are we focusing on the charter schools as much as the public?
I'm advocating that we not just see as minority students only attending public schools.
Yeah.
It's an important population base, but there's a lot happening in the choice and charter arena, and I think we're missing opportunities there that we need to work with.
Okay. Other questions? Yeah, Mark.
Do we understand? I know DPI's information when they survey students and say, what are your intents, and universities 50%, and yet we're achieving 32, 33%, or 32%. We see the same phenomena in the technical colleges where there's probably 22% say they're intending to go, yet we see 17 show up. Is that fallout financial, or do we understand, what causes the fallout between the 50% and the 30-some percent?
Each of our institutions sort of tracks that on their own. Some of these students, of course, are going to the privates. That's a big portion of it. Some of them are going to the tech colleges. So if you take this top 50% and say where they go, some of them are headed out of state. Some of them are headed to the privates in-state. Some of them are headed into the technical colleges. Most of them in that top 50% are actually heading off to college somewhere, or a higher ed institution somewhere. They're going someplace. So it is about getting a bigger share of that market.
Mark, what I'm pleased that there are some improvements, especially in the interim. Bigger concern that I have is graduation. It just doesn't do us any good to have students of color come in and spend a lot of time and money and accumulate wealth and not graduate.
Correct.
At that point, it doesn't matter how many years you were at Madison or wherever if you didn't get your diploma. So how are we doing there?
And we are improving those graduation rates. And if you'll remember the March presentation last month, we did see that the gap for the underrepresented minorities is closing. We're getting better at both the retention rate and the 4- and 6-year graduation rate. So it's improving. A couple of our campuses, that gap's actually closed. Excuse me. I think the thing that's important to realize here is that we have some opportunities. One is to bring in more students, and the other then is to improve the efficiency of moving them through the system and getting them to degree. And those are goals on each of our campuses, to do both of those. Sure.
Do we have specific campus-by-campus multi-year improvement goals in overall all races, graduation levels, and in minority?
Yes.
We do?
Yes. Each institution, as part of their More Graduates plan, turned in and has a plan to increase not just their graduation rates, not just the number of graduates they put out, but graduation rates, retention rates, and in various populations of students.
And is this one of 20 different goals that they might have, or is this what about in terms of priority? Is this part of Job 1?
It is part of Job 1. Each institution, though, within this More Graduates plan has different sets of priorities. So some of our institutions are focusing on improving their retention rate above other things, or their graduation rate. Others are opening up access to increase their enrollment. So it depends on the particular situation of those institutions. Some institutions have some room to grow. They have the physical space and can see growing the faculty with the revenue that comes with the students. Others are pretty limited in physical space, so they are looking at efficiency measures to pull up. So each of them is different in exactly how they prioritize in under the their More Graduates plan. Right. Overall, I'm going to go through the overall enrollment pretty quickly here. One of the things I want to point out is, remember a while ago we looked at the demographics and that the number of Wisconsin students coming out of high school is falling, and the number coming to our institutions is falling. In this graph, we look at the number of undergraduates we have on our campuses, and notice we haven't seen that trend. We're not falling. We've been able to hold constant over the last 2 years. That peak in the Wisconsin high school demographics happened in 2007. It continued to climb from 2007 to 2008, 9, and 10, and we reached a peak in 10, and we've leveled off. So we've been able to make that gap up. We've taken advantage of some opportunities already to look at other students besides that sort of traditional, what everybody thinks of as the college student, that kid coming out of high school, coming to the UW system. We're finding other students. So where are we finding them, and how might we improve it? Non-resident students has been the big key. We've seen significant growth in the number of non-resident students on our campus, and a big piece of this is the international students. All of our institutions are trying to increase the percentage of international students on their campus for a couple of really great reasons, and primarily it is to increase the globalization of their curriculum and the discussions that they have in their classrooms, and making our classrooms much more global than they are when you just have a set of Wisconsin students, many of which may not have left the state, but to bring in not just out-of-state students from Illinois and Michigan and Ohio and Iowa, but to bring in international students from around the world to flavor the discussions that you have, to increase the interactions that you have within a global community. In particular, what we've seen is that in the last couple of years, the new freshmen coming from out of state has really jumped in the past year. A lot of this jump has to do with international students in the last year. A lot of that jump is due to international student increases. I want to turn now and look a little bit at the four-year graduation rate, so the final sort of look at efficiency. Now, as Kevin pointed out, we've got to be careful with efficiencies, because we don't just want to look at and think just about these freshmen that are coming in. We also want to make sure, thank you, we also want to make sure that we have the non-traditional student enrolled and that we serve them and we know they're going to take longer. What we see is that over the sort of a 30-year period, we had an increasing time to degree. Some of that had to do with more non-traditional students. Some of it had to do with students just deciding to take longer. Some of it had to do with us putting impediments in their way, some problems with not offering the courses exactly when we needed them, expansion of the curriculum a little bit. But that has been turned around. We brought it back down. In about a 5-year period from about 1998 through 2003, we were able to cut it by a full semester. All right? So this says that what this chart shows is that in 1998 or so, it took a student about 11 semesters to graduate, 5.5 years. We've got it down to about 5 now, on average. This includes transfer students. It includes everyone. Take the snapshot of when they graduated, how long were they in school. What I notice out of this is that we're not back where we started, where we were in 1980. We might be able to drop this down one more semester, but it'll take some work to do it. So let's look at a few things. I want to address one of the myths that I've heard often as I've walked around Madison, as I've talked with people at the Capitol, as I've talked to people on the streets. And that is that the 4-year graduation rate, kids aren't graduating the way they used to. I had a gentleman make the comment to me that he was in a room of business leaders, and he asked them, how many of you graduated, were in college and graduated in 4 years? And he said, every hand went up. He said, now we're only graduating, in 4 years, even Madison only gets about 50%. It used to be much higher. Well, the comparison groups he was working with weren't the same. One is a group of people who have degrees, and they're in business leadership positions. Another is every freshman that came in our door. It's a little different. So what really has happened with our 4- and 6-year graduation rates? Well, from 1980 to 2010, you can see that the 4-year graduation rate, which is on the bottom, and the blue line is graduating at the same institution, the red line is at any UW institution, and then the green line is 6-year graduation rate at the same institution where they started, and the purple line is at any institution within 6 years. What you can see is that they've been climbing since 1980. And doing pretty well. This 60% graduation rate at the same institution, the green line that we're at now, really is noticeably above the national average. We're doing very well with that. The 4-year graduation rate, though, is a different story. We are below the national average, and we're working to improve it, and it's a place where we can get some efficiency if we can get students through a little bit more quickly.
Before you go on.
Yes.
You might, in the future, control for Madison. Take Madison out, then you'd have a substantially different look.
Actually, the charts are the same in terms of where they set changes, but the slopes does not. So I've looked at each individual institution and put this together, and there's a couple of institutions that have been flattered down and then back up, but all of our institutions over the last decade have seen these 4-year graduation rates going up. There's some wiggle around on it, but most of our institutions, this has been increasing over the 30-year period.
Well, we have very, very hodgepodge of numbers.
We do. You do.
Could you go back one slide?
Sure.
Haven't we ever looked at the economics of all-in cost for the university, for the student, for the family, dropping your 9.5 down to 9, with an eye toward what we heard a couple of months ago from our Andy, I think his name was, at Georgetown about this business of efficiencies. And I think we might, if we put a price tag, it would be helpful and really quite illustrative.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
Something to think about.
Yep.
Mark, I'm sorry.
No.
You just said the national average. If you go to the next slide, when you talk about the national average, does that include the privates?
All
public. It is consistent with our data.
Yep. Regina.
I know after the break we're going to have an opportunity to hear from some of the campuses. But I've had an opportunity, for example, just lately I was in Eau Claire, and Provost Klein talked about some of their initiatives, their student initiative with the Blue Gold, and how the differential tuition is being used to plan a strategy that has actually been very successful, moving the time to degree for the more traditional student into the quite some significant changes. Not now, but after the break, I'd like to be able to hear from not only our participants in the panel, but any of the other provosts that have similar experiences to sort of address the question that Regent Whitburn asked about what's happening at the comprehensive as opposed to Madison.
Good.
Chuck, and then Mark.
This slide reminds me of this continuing question of graduation rates not based on, by institution, which factors in students who transfer from one institution to another. And I'm just wondering how close, or are we there in capturing accurate data? Because a student who starts at UW Parkside and graduates from UW Madison is not a failure for Parkside. It's a success for the system, and it's a success for that student.
And they're
we
not
ought not be penalizing Parkside in that measurement by virtue of that, just not penalizing specifically WB, but just as an example. And so I'm just wondering how close are we to having that data that gives a Parkside credit for that graduate, even if that graduate doesn't finish there?
We get that information. We've got it, and each of our institutions knows sort of and can track. Students started here. How many graduated somewhere in the system in 6 years, or graduated anywhere in the country in 6 years, as long as the institution they graduate from is in the the national database, the National Clearinghouse database. So we are tracking that. And in fact, it's how we put together that earlier slide when we showed how transfer students do, the number that graduate in 4 years anywhere in the system or another institution. We're tracking that so we can, and each of our institutions can pull that apart for themselves and say, students started here as a freshman. How many of them graduated in 4 or 5 or 6 years here, graduated at another UW institution, graduated at any other institution in the country? That's a very important thing to follow. Yes, Mark.
I just want to sound a cautionary note. We are a system, and I think either we're going to be focusing on system data, or we're going to be looking at every single institution. We need to resist, in my view, the tendency to control for Campus X, because name the category, and you and every chancellor know which campus to take out of the numbers in order to have the numbers be different. If we're going to say, we're looking at graduates in freshwater sciences, but we'll control for UW-Milwaukee. Or, study abroad, but we're going to control for UW-Stevens Point. This is system data, and we need to try to make sense of the system data. And if we want to be seeing how a particular campus, whether it's Parkside or Superior or Madison, skews the data, then we've got to look at every single institution and keep our eye on what have we asked that institution to do for the state of Wisconsin. Okay. It's very tricky stuff.
Mm-hmm. And this chart, I want to talk about this chart because it balances that tightrope between looking at system and looking at individual institutions. And another continual problem that I run into, and that is within the state, people want to compare our institutions to each other when they have very, very different missions, right? Comparing Superior and Madison is nonsensical. But even comparing Green Bay and Stevens Point has its problems because of their difference in mission. So what I have done in looking at things like four-year graduation rates and retention rates and six-year graduation rates, all of those, is to not look and compare our institutions to each other, but to institutions that have the same sort of student makeup as they do, individually. And there's a website out there that will really help you do this. It's got some problems, but it'll get you started down the road. It's just College Results Online, and they look at the national data, and you go in there, you put in the institution you want to look at, and it'll return to you a group of institutions, either 15, 25, or 50 if your spreadsheet will hold that many, institutions and a bunch of data on them. And it ranks them based on six-year graduation rate. And what's nice is that you know these students have about the same academic credentials coming in, because what they're looking at for figuring out who they put in this survey, number one is ACT and SAT scores. So sort of a look at are the students prepared in the same way. But it also then looks at, is the campus you're looking at a public or a private institution? They've set up these different ways of determining which institution they select as your quote-unquote peers based on those factors that are most relevant in determining a student's success on a campus from national data. So it is this estimated ACT, SAT scores, whether they come from private or public. Admission selectivity of the institution, percent of first-time, full-time, degree-seeking undergraduate students that receive federal Pell Grants. And there's a list of them. So you get a reasonable shot of a look at a number of other campuses that have a student body that is reasonably like yours and has the same, nearly the same, likelihood of success. So how do you compare with them? Now, when you do this, you'll never end up on top, because they're going to pick a range of institutions for you. And so there'll be some ahead of you and some below. What I wanted to look at, and what I found interesting as I looked at this, is that there was something unique that fell out of it. And so I've done this for each institution, and then look at them individually, and then look at what the collective data tells us. When we look at retention rates, 7 of our 13 institutions are below their peer average. 6 of them are above. When we look at each institution, how far they are above or below the mean in retention rate of that peer group, what we find is you add them all up, you divide by the 16 institutions that are in there, that our campuses on average are only off by 0.3 of a percentage point. So it's really close. They're on target. When you look at the range, our campuses range from 4.7 percentage points below the average for their peer group up to about 2.4 above. Okay? So one of our institutions is 4.7 percentage points below their mean, and another institution is 2.4 percentage points above their mean. So that's sort of the range of our institutions. Go to six-year graduation rates, and you see exactly the same thing. Same kind of ranges, really close to being on the average as a system, and 7 of our institutions are above. But look at the four-year graduation rates. Things changed drastically there. All of our institutions are below the average. Not a single one is at the average. They're all below. And the distance from that average is almost 8 percentage points. It ranges from -18 to -1. Our four-year graduation rates and now are not where the rest of our data is. It is an area we've got to work on. It's an area we've got to improve on. All of our chancellors have known that and are working on it. We have seen nice improvement in our four-year graduation rates across our campuses over the last 30 years. But we certainly aren't sort of in keeping with being able to get these students through in the efficient four-year period. We had a long discussion about this at our last meeting, about why that is and what we need to do and those sorts of things. But it clearly is an area it is an opportunity. It's a place that we can move more of our students through at a faster rate if we can focus on these four-year graduation rates. And again, you're comparing institutions with like student bodies and similar missions. So a lot of the arguments about whether or not we should hit these or not sort of start to fall out. Yes, Regent Whitburn.
And Mark, this drives the concern that I have, and while I'm sensitive to your observation, the reality is that in some campuses we're doing a little better than in others. Some campuses we face a larger hill than in others. And part of our job, it seems to me at least, is to be monitoring and paying attention.
Yeah.
Yes, John.
Mark, great presentation, excellent information. I would ask you to go back to slide 20 because I think that's the most significant slide in the whole deck. And I wonder if you've got projections or able to make projections going out into future years, what that's going to look like.
We haven't done projections on this. No, it depends. It will depend on our tuition. It will depend on the demographics of the state, those students coming to us. So we haven't done those projections, no.
Because I see that obviously as the biggest challenge to all the goals that are laid out there.
Let me take you to your favorite slide then.
Great.
Mark, let me just, Mark, before we go to break, and thanks, I echo John, Regent Drew's comments. This was an excellent discussion. But let me just, one observation, see if this is probably too simplistic, but in looking at enrollment rates, enrollment totals, which are, of course, important, and looking at our high school, how many people from Wisconsin residents are coming up. The reason we've been able to keep, at least one of the key reasons we've been able to keep enrollment rates numbers where we are, is the sharp increase in non-resident students.
Exactly.
Which, of course, we had quite a debate in this body in the last 5 years about what we are charging non-residents. And we had a lot of thought on what we should do. Is that one of the reasons? I think the graph is pretty clear on that, but am I missing something here?
No, our out-of-state, our non-resident tuition rates are important. You know, we know that if we get those too high, we're not competitive and we don't recruit those students at the same rates that we currently are. And as you said, a decade ago, there was a big discussion about that, and we brought that number down a little bit, and it's made a big difference. I think the important thing to remember when talking about tuition rates for the non-residents is you want to be high enough that they're covering their costs, and yet low enough that you don't price yourself out of the market. And hopefully those two give you a window to work with, right? They don't get inverted.
Without the increase in the number of non-resident students,
we're in trouble.
Our numbers would have not been a straight line the last 3 to 5 years. They would have been
7
south.
percentage points below what they are now. Yep. We would be in a world of hurt.
Well, and I don't want to hold us up from our favorite slide, but the other question as we go into the next session is, you know, you talk about that flat line of 30 to 32% of high school graduates.
Yes.
What are some initiatives to penetrate that, given the change in what can happen to a high school graduate if they don't have something beyond high school? That's another thing, because there's got to be some initiatives that will drive that number, and to even drive that number a couple percentages will make a difference.
Yep. Yeah, and each of the institutions has a different focus on how they go about hitting their admissions numbers and the percentage from in-state and out-of-state. So they're all working on that and have their way of addressing the issues.
Mark?
Yeah.
And if I could, I think we also have to look at it a little more broadly, that there isn't just one way to win, that going to a 4-year institution is not the only way to succeed, that there are other pathways, through the technical colleges, through apprenticeships, through things like that, that are also part of the strategy for moving the economy forward.
All right. We'll be back in about 10, 15-minute break. We'll be back. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Good.
All right. A couple things before we start up again. First, I'm reminded by Greg and I'm reminded by Jane, and I should have said it when we began, please try to talk into your microphone. We're having a little hard time picking up some of the questions and comments by the Regents. So that's a gentle first reminder, which should have been made earlier. But anyway, finally, you may have noticed that we have a fuller than usual visitors gallery today, and on behalf of all of my colleagues, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the visiting delegation, and I'm going to say this wrong, the University of Ilorin in Nigeria. I should probably emphasize the warm part of that greeting because, as I understand, the temperature was running around 100 degrees when the group left Nigeria. And what we probably have here comes as some shock. Our visitors are here for collaborative research endeavors with partner institutions here in the UW system, including UW Stout and UW Madison. They're also very interested in learning about our governance system. They will have a chance to become acquainted with UW Stout's Faculty Senate and Senate of Academic Staff, but also they wanted to listen and learn about the UW system's role and the role of this Board of Regents. So welcome to Wisconsin, and we hope you have an informative, enjoyable, and not too chilly a visit. So welcome. Mr. Nook.
When they learn how all our systems work, could they report back?
Yeah, somebody report back to us. You're on the agenda for the next meeting. Mr. Nook.
Yeah, just a couple of opening remarks. We've got three chancellors who are going to speak to you. We've given them each 30 minutes, so we've got 90 minutes, and if we stay on, if we follow that, we'll go 20 minutes after. So I don't want to sort of hold up the conversation or discussion at all, but I will be watching the clock and trying to give people high signs we need to move to the next speaker. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about student success at the University of Wisconsin-Parkside. And I'd like to begin by just letting you know that at UW-Parkside we continue to focus on living our mission of providing high-quality education through our 4 hallmarks. And our 4 hallmarks are student success, academic excellence, diversity and inclusion, and community engagement. So today I will talk about our students and their success. The More Graduates for Wisconsin initiative in 2010 served as a catalyst at UW-Parkside for us to set and reach for enrollment, retention, and graduation targets. We believe that the More Graduates for Wisconsin initiative aligns with our strategic plan known as the UW-Parkside Promise, with Graduate Parkside, which is our Title III grant, and with our academic plan. For the next few minutes, I will present our progress to date while sharing characteristics of UW-Parkside students. You will note that our results in these first 3 years are mixed. We are taking the long view and monitoring trends, using data to drive decisions and keeping students at the center of all of our actions. At the end of the presentation, I will highlight promising practices and early successes in enrollment management, our Graduate Parkside program, and the academic plan. And I will present our SWOT, or our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for continued success. I will share a lot of data, just like Mark, and I ask that you focus on the trends to gain an understanding of the focus of student success at UW-Parkside. So first, let me start with the overall enrollment. We are not meeting our target for undergraduates at UW-Parkside, but we are exceeding our targets for graduate enrollment. The orange bar is our plan, and the green bars show our actuals. And I will talk more about these. We have made some changes to our recruitment and admissions practices at UW-Parkside, and we know more about those students who can be successful. We've also actually had more students graduate than predicted, causing us to have fewer returning students continue enrollment. But I'll take a student graduating any day. We've also created new pathways through a 1+3 program with Gateway Technical College for students with lower ACT scores, and believe that it's better for them to start at our partner institutions before starting at UW-Parkside. As Mark mentioned, the economy has certainly had an impact on our enrollment. And you will see from my presentation that our students are different, and many of them are stopping out for work or family responsibilities and not having continuous enrollment. And I'll talk about our changes in demographics. But more importantly, I want you to understand that we understand these challenges at our campus, and all of us are working very hard to make a difference and make an impact. So first, just a little bit about demographics. Mark certainly showed the slide of the changes in high school demographics. And this shows, and of course it shows Wisconsin having the greatest percentage of decrease. But look at the states around us. They also have that same percentage of decrease. And this is from the same data source that Mark had. So we're seeing a decrease in traditional students, those graduating directly from high school. But we are seeing an increase in Hispanic students in our region and across our state. And then we know that a real opportunity for us is outreach to adult learners, and as presented in the open letter from the American Council on Education, better known as post-traditional learners. We've been using and looking at a lot of data at UW-Parkside, and our data has shown us that students with ACT scores between 21 and 24 were the most successful. And we've been working with our school districts to improve school readiness or college readiness and performance on the ACT. You will see from fall of 2003, actually I'm going to focus on, down here, our average ACT was 19.9. This fall, it's 21.3. So we are recruiting a better prepared student as performed on the ACT score, and we believe that's positive for us, and it does impact our student retention. Early indications for the fall to spring retention from this year showed that we did have a little bit better retention rate of those students who started in the fall and continued in the spring. Some folks have questioned, well, with a changing in your ACT score, what happens to those students who may not meet that average or who have lower ACT scores? We have signed new articulation agreements and have dual enrollment pathways with Gateway Technical College for these students who want to begin their college experience in a different way. But our commitment to serving first-generation students and students of color has not been diminished, and I will show you that. So what do students study at UW-Parkside? I've had the opportunity to host many of our regents on campus and love introducing you to our students and what they do, and having you get to meet our faculty, and they can tell you the stories about their engagement with our students. This chart does not include undecided or undeclared majors, but the most popular programs align with Mark's data and where our graduates are: business, criminal justice, and biological sciences. I'd like for you to note the applied health sciences, the fifth one, 179 students. This program started in September of 2009 and has exceeded all enrollment projections and is one of our most popular programs on campus. And I'll brag about the successes of biological sciences and applied health sciences in just a moment. We've talked a lot earlier about how students pay for college, and I think this slide is helpful. Based on the 2011 National Survey of Student Engagement, you can see that UW-Parkside freshmen and seniors pay more than their counterparts at the UW comprehensives. And so for freshmen, 52% of our freshmen are paying their way, as compared to 48% at the comprehensives. But for our seniors, 79% of our students are paying their expenses, where 65% at the comprehensives. Another slide about how students are paying for their university experience is with the help of federal financial aid. At UW-Parkside, over 70% of our students receive some type of financial assistance, grant, scholarship, or loan, and 60% receive loans. But I think it's important to note the increase in the number of students receiving the Pell Grant, which is the federally funded financial aid program that has seen growth across the country from an investment in helping more students to have access to higher education. And our students definitely rely on this. So what's another distinguishing feature about a UW-Parkside student? I wish I could tell you the personal stories of our students, but we certainly don't have time for that. But one of the things we know about our students at UW-Parkside is that they work more than 20 hours a week off campus. The green line shows UW-Parkside students, the red line is UW Comprehensives, and the blue line is all campuses participating in the National Survey of Student Engagement. And you will see that ours is significantly higher both for freshmen and seniors, but you'll also see that it is declining a bit. And so that is helpful in some ways because they're able to maybe add more courses and complete their degrees in a more timely way. This is something we definitely will monitor in the next administration of the NESI, which will be in 2014. It'll be interesting to see if this trend stays the same. In terms of first-generation students, one of the things that I'm most proud of is how we serve first-generation students, and I believe this has been a focus at UW-Parkside since our founding 45 years ago. And one of the most special moments for me at commencement is sharing the fact that 62% of the graduates crossing the stage are the first in their families to earn a university degree. I am really proud of how we are transforming lives at UW-Parkside and preparing the leaders for the future. And you can see that our trend has remained relatively stable, but just under 60% of our incoming freshmen are the first in their families to go to college. I also want to talk about our commitment to serving students of color. And again, this reflects the region where we live. Southeastern Wisconsin, we have the most dense population of students of color in our region. And at UW-Parkside, the total students of color for fall of 2012 was 28.6%. And you can see that that has been increasing at our campus. But in alignment with Mark's statistics, we're seeing a little bit of a decrease for African American students, but certainly growth in our Hispanic students. African American students are the green line, and the Hispanic students are the blue line. So what are we doing to make sure that we turn the tide and make sure that the African American students actually can get that number higher? We are working very closely with our recruitment efforts in our high schools and actually some of our local churches to be able to talk about college success and college opportunities. So I'd like to now shift to retention. Here again, we are not meeting our targets in the fall-to-fall student retention. But this only takes into account full-time students, full-time freshmen entering. A factor... That's me. So a factor impacting student retention, and a question that was asked earlier, was about students who need remediation. The green line is UW-Parkside, students needing remedial English, and the yellow line is the UW colleges, and the red line is UW comprehensives. And I apologize, I don't have the data points from my colleagues for the last few years, but what I do want to show is that we...
Regent Roberts?
Yes.
Welcome to the meeting. If you would please put your golf club down for a few minutes. We're picking up some background noise, Gary, so just be aware of that.
And here you'll see that we are seeing a decrease in the students requiring remedial English. This also could be in alignment with more students, the higher performance on the ACT. In terms of remedial math, a slight decline at UW-Parkside over time, but I want to talk about an early success that we are seeing and how we're delivering remedial math to the students who enroll at enroll in remedial math. In 2011, we had a 33% pass rate in remedial math. Obviously unacceptable. If you cannot do the basics of math, it's going to be very difficult for you to get through college. Under the leadership of our learning assistants and our provost office and Dr. Rich Karwatka, we introduced a competency-based math program where students have to pass 10 areas in progression before advancing to the next concept of math. And they're also provided supplemental instruction. In the fall of 2012, we had a pass rate of 56.6% to the next level of math. So we believe that this is another way to help our students be successful. Another initiative that we're seeing progress on student retention, when you look at the whole, or let me say this differently. You can't just look at all students the same. You can't look at all campuses the same. So at UW-Parkside, our Student Support Services has a program where we work to help students be successful. The green bar is the total cohort by year. The orange bar is those students enrolled in the Student Support Services program. And you will see in all cases the retention rate from the first year to second year to the third year is higher for those students in the Support Services program. This program is designed for first-generation students who need remedial education, and during this experience, they are part of learning communities. They are provided intrusive advising, supplemental instruction, and career exploration. And we believe that these students will succeed at UW-Parkside. Next is graduation rates. And this slide shows the 6-year graduation rate for first-time, full-time students. But that is not who our students are at UW-Parkside, so it's not measuring all of our students. I was very happy to hear at the American Council of Education meeting on Monday that Martha Cantor from the Department of Education noted that they will soon be collecting graduation and retention data for transfer students and part-time students. So we're going to be able to tell a better story, and we believe that this is good news for us. One of the slides that Mark also showed, and he showed it going a different way. My slides are horizontal, his were vertical. But this shows of our starting cohort in 2005. The dark green bar is graduated from UW-Parkside. The lighter green bar is graduated from another institution. The yellow bar, 4 years later in 2009, they were still enrolled at UW-Parkside, and the light blue still enrolled at another institution. And so our students are somewhere, but not necessarily completing at UW-Parkside. We have much greater success for those students who transfer into our institution. Again, the same here, and we're seeing that they are either graduated or still enrolled within that 6-year time frame. And if you extend that even further, we would see greater success because our students take longer. Here is actually our goals related to the More Graduates plan. The top line is our bachelor's degrees conferred. The bottom line is graduate and professional degrees. We have very few graduate students and an area for growth opportunity for us. But we have seen an increase, and we believe this will be the 3rd year in a row that 100 more students have graduated since the 2010. And so we're very proud of that and continue to study that. And we also know that our students of color are graduating, but not at the same rate, and we're working on that. Whoops. So how do we compare to our peers? This is the peer discussion that Mark talked about from, not the College Portrait Education Trust, the Ed Trust, thank you. And you'll see here, we're sort of in the middle of the pack, certainly not where we want to be. There are no Wisconsin peers in this group. So Lock Haven in Pennsylvania, West Texas A&M, Black Hills State in South Dakota, and a couple of institutions in Indiana. But I also want to talk about some points of distinction that very few people know about, and I want to make sure everybody knows. 89% of our students who apply to a professional school get into the school of their choice. And so these bars represent the number of students who have been placed into professional programs like dentistry, medicine, pharmacy, physical therapy, physician's assistant, following graduation. And this is over a decade. Even better news related to that is the number of students of color. 20% of these graduates on average from 2001 to 2012 are students of color going on to professional schools, with again the highest being in medicine and pharmacy. So why is this working, and what are our early successes? Well, we believe part of that is because of the way that we have aligned, and we've been very intentional about our planning and actions. But we know that we have more work to do. So a few things that I would like to point out. First of all, we have committed to an integrated and strategic enrollment management philosophy at UW-Parkside. One of the first things we did is launch a very strong recruitment effort in our high schools, in our technical college partners, and with our community college partner in Northern Illinois. The focus is on standout. So we want students to see themselves at UW-Parkside and see how they can stand out as a member of our learning community. One of the other things that I'm very proud of is also the number of articulation agreements that we have signed with Gateway Technical College, Moraine Park Technical College, Milwaukee Area Technical College, and Waukesha County Technical College and the College of Lake County, because we do believe that we can be that pathway for students from the 2-year program to the successful 4-year program. And in the interest of time, I can't go through all of the successes and things in progress. We also have been very fortunate to receive a grant from the Title III grant that is a 5-year grant to help us focus on improving our retention and graduation of our students. And I've talked about competency math, a little bit about the learning communities. I want to talk a little bit about Ranger Link, because Ranger Link is a different program. This program was a partnership between Career Services, Graduate Parkside, our Center for Community Partnership, and regional employers to introduce first-generation students and underrepresented minorities to the world of work and work experiences. It's an 8-week internship program, and we were fortunate to receive a $50,000 grant from the Mary Frost Ashley Charitable Trust. They had added an additional $25,000 to this program, and the Kloss Foundation has awarded us $24,000, so we have about $100,000 to support our students in this program. We partner with regional employers to provide work experience and project-based learning, and then those students complete that experience, and we pay the student with a grant provided from Mary Frost Ashley and the Kloss Foundation. What are the values of this? Students get exposure to employers and opportunities and can work on both those soft skills like teamwork, work ethic, communication in advance, and align that with their major interest. The other significant opportunity at UW-Parkside was the creation of our academic plan that our faculty approved in April of last year, April of 2012. And one of the changes there, and with the academic plan, it is driven around our student profile, who do we teach, our academic programs, what do we teach, and then the pedagogy and how do we teach and prepare our graduates to be ready for the regional needs in our community. But the one I want to talk about here, because I could spend an hour talking about each of these, is the new academic calendar. Our faculty approved a change in the academic calendar and extended our winter session from 2 weeks to 4 weeks. And so we have a full J term. And the first J term we had was this winter. And we saw an increase of 140% in enrollment from 268 students to 640 students. That is good news. I saw students during the J term, ask them how they liked it. They said they loved it because it allowed them to be continuously enrolled and take some additional classes on their pathway to degree. As you can see, I have a lot of material, and I don't want to take time away from my colleagues here. So I just want to close with this slide and a last slide. When I was thinking about our focus on the future and thinking about how to frame the opportunities and threats, and when I think about opportunities and threats, I think of those things that are more external. I wanted to make sure that I shared with you what I see as our strengths and maybe some of our limitations or weaknesses internally. And I will, I think, kind of go through these. I see that our strengths at UW-Parkside is that we do, as a campus community, have a shared vision for student success. It is something that we talk about. It is something that is important to us and each of our opportunities to engage with our students and help them. I also believe that we have faculty and staff engagement, and I'm very proud of my colleagues at the campus that even in times of challenge that we continue to keep students at the center of what we do. We also are working very hard to align our planning and all of our different plans with how we allocate our resources and making sure that we allocate our resources with the students in mind. And we are using more data now than ever before at UW-Parkside, and that leads to some of the weaknesses in terms of initiative fatigue, competing priorities, and diminishing resources. The opportunities will be to continue to partner with our K-12 partners, including our colleagues at the charter and choice schools, to be one of the campuses exploring the flex option to make higher education more available to adult learners in southeastern Wisconsin who have some college. And then certainly some of the threats that Mark talked about would be the diminishing resources, competitive compensation, and I would add keeping up with this accelerated pace of change in so many dimensions. And so I think those are the things we have to keep on the forefront as we continue to enhance student success at UW-Parkside. But I'd like to end with a little March Madness Ranger style. And we are the only Division II program in the state of Wisconsin. And our men's basketball program is the GLVC, or Great Lakes Valley Conference East Division champions, first time in school history. And Luke Riegel, our coach, was named Coach of the Year. Jeremy Saffold was named Player of the Year from the conference. And I think you can see that student success is not only a team sport at UW Parkside, but student success is our mission. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer questions. Mike. Regent Falvo, excuse me.
Thank you, Chancellor Ford. I was just looking at a couple of slides. I think I can answer my own question, but enrollment's down a bit. Degrees conferred is up. Six-year graduation rate is below plan. It all doesn't seem to... Of course, your six-year graduation rate stops in 06 on this chart, so I don't know more recently if that changes.
The six-year graduation rate is actually the chart of the students who started in 06 and completed in 2012. That's one of the challenges with the metrics that the federal government asked us to keep track of, is they're only capturing the first-time, full-time students. Here in the UW, we're also capturing transfer student enrollment. So we have students who are not being counted in some of those rates, but are part-time students who are graduating, and they may be taking 8 years or 10 years.
So your actual graduation percentage rate must be up.
That's our hope. Yes, we believe that would be the case.
Thank you.
And those are some of the things we have to figure out. How do we tell that story more effectively, because we are seeing some early successes here at the university.
The peer group comparison that we're below the average, and I'm not questioning whether or not they're truly peers, but what are the messages? Is there any best cases, or have you looked behind those?
Some of those, let me talk about how those peers are selected. They are institutions that have about the same size of campus as us, similar ACT, very similar demographic profile.
Mark, explain that.
Okay, so that piece. In terms of some of the best practices, talking with some of the presidents and chancellors of those institutions, we're all working on various initiatives to be able to help that. We are going to visit another campus as part of our Title III grant that has seen some early success. And so we're bringing that back, and we do send our colleagues are also participating in some other national initiatives to learn what is working. Competency-based math is one of those strategies that is working for us.
You mentioned more than once, and I'm pleased to hear the articulations, agreements that you have with the technical college and the community college. And I'm looking at the two slides that have to do with the remedial English and the remedial math. But part of it is that they're graduating from high school, going to those technical colleges and community college, and maybe even needing some remedial ed assistance there. I'm more interested in what are you doing with the high schools and even middle schools, because the ideal is you'd like to have them graduate, be graduates of high school coming into your institution and not having to spend almost any time whatsoever in any kind of remediation. So what's happening on that side?
Around the time when I started, there was a group in Racine County. We serve both Kenosha and Racine. And Racine has one of its community goals as part of its higher expectations strategic plan is to raise educational attainment. And so business leaders, government leaders, K-12 leaders, and higher ed leaders all came around the same table. And what we discovered during part of that conversation, and this was in 2009, 2010, is that the school districts didn't know how many of their students actually needed remedial education. So one of the first steps, Jose, is the awareness and sharing information. And then we do have our faculty working with our colleagues in the K-12 to be able to help them understand what students are missing. And several times we'll see people on the same committees or same task forces in the region. I also meet regularly with our superintendents, both in Racine County and Kenosha and Burlington, to be able to talk about what can we do. But part of it is the messaging of letting them know what some of the challenges students face that have graduated from their programs.
I don't have a question, just a comment that I want to express a tremendous amount of appreciation for the work with the technical colleges. Your region has a very strong reputation for the relationships that have developed. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's truly a pleasure to work with my partners there.
Great job. I noticed that Parkside is really heavily dependent on Pell Grants and has a very high percentage of Pell Grant recipients. As you think about threats, how concerned are you, given all that is going on these days in Washington with sequestration and other budget debates, about the effect if that program is significantly reduced in time?
Well, it was part of a briefing by Terry Hartle from the American Council on Education, who spoke here a couple of years ago. He's sort of the public policy guru for higher education. And at this point, the Pell Grant is not part of sequestration. And so that is the good news. But we have also seen such a significant increase in the dollars going to support the Pell Grant program that, of course, it does concern me. So it's one that we are continually watching. And also making sure, just as we have the goal to get more students to completion, we know that our partners at the Department of Education also have that goal. So in making sure that we're making that continued progress to help students graduate. And then the other thing I would say, Regent Pruitt, is that we are also working to raise more funds for need-based scholarships for the campus. And so we'll never be able to meet that through private donations, but it's something that we continue to talk about with folks in our community and how they can give back to help students be able to achieve higher education.
I could just jump in there quickly, and in response to Regent Pruitt's question, it's absolutely true. Pell Grant, this is great, will not be affected by sequestration, but some of the federally funded campus-based programs will, like GEAR Up, like TRIO. So that will be a problem that sequestration will visit on us in terms of, again, getting toward these numbers.
One last question for Chancellor Ford.
First, I want to apologize. I attended Parkside, but I graduated from another institution. So I'm pretty sure
I count you as a success. Success.
Somewhere. You mentioned students who stop out to work for a semester or a year. And I guess my question is, how prevalent is that? Do they come back? They have a lower chance of coming back? Are there strategies to deal with that when people are talking about doing that? And are you able to stay connected with them while they're gone?
Well, first of all, staying connected with them is one of the things we're trying to do through technologies. And when a student does stop enrollment, and that is between the fall and spring, spring and fall, winter, summer, whatever it might be, we're trying to continue communication with them. Oftentimes, if they're at the beginning of their educational experience, freshman, sophomore year, they have a higher likelihood of not returning. If they're closer to completing, they do come back at some point or transfer. But what we know about students today is they swirl. They swirl from campus to campus, and they may not be enrolled at UW-Parkside, but they may be enrolled online at another campus. They may be taking a MOOC. They may have a new assignment with their job. And I think what we have to understand is that students are on a variety of pathways to achieve education today. And that's why some of the way we keep data, we need to be sensitive to that some of this only captures a very traditional pathway. Thank you all. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Chancellor Van Galen.
Well, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to visit with you about student success and degree attainment at the University of Wisconsin-River Falls. We also have a campus that is very student-centered. I think our faculty and staff are highly committed to effectively teaching and mentoring students, and so we come at this challenge with that context. What I'd like to do this morning, as I show you an outline of my remarks, I'd like to provide some context to UW-River Falls, where we are, which really influences very much who we are as an institution, tell you a bit about the students that we serve. We'll briefly look at some important trends and goals in terms of our progress and our aspirations in this area. And then I'll discuss several initiatives that are specifically designed to increase student success, degree attainment, and then conclude with some key opportunities and threats. I do think that one of the messages for all of us, and certainly that I bring back to the campus, is it is everyone's job. We play different roles on a campus, faculty and staff, but this is something that really requires commitment from everyone. So a little bit of context. River Falls is the westernmost institution in the UW system. I know many of you have been on our campus, but others haven't. So I think it's important for you to understand where we are and who we are. If you left Van Nuys Hall and drove 4 hours on I-94, you would be pretty much in River Falls. You could stop halfway, you'd only be in Black River Falls. On the other hand, if you were in River Falls, you could be in downtown St. Paul in 25 minutes. So we're very close to the Wisconsin-Minnesota border. River Falls is a small town of 15,000. And if you look at the map, you can see we're about 8 miles away from Hudson, Wisconsin, which is right on the Minnesota border, and one of the busiest interstates in the state of Wisconsin, I-94. So as we look to the east as an institution, we have strength in areas such as agriculture, and we recruit students from the entire state to River Falls. Based on that strength, we have the third largest dairy science program in the country. As we look to the west, we are actually part of the Minneapolis-St. Paul statistical metropolitan region. And we're just down the road from a very dynamic city of 3.1 million people. Minneapolis-St. Paul is an economic engine, not only for Minnesota, but also for the entire St. Croix Valley, which includes far western Wisconsin. The region has been growing significantly. Between the years 2000 and 2010, St. Croix County grew 34%, the fastest growing county in the state of Wisconsin. This graphic looks to the future. These are population projections between the years 2000 and 2035. The shaded counties among Wisconsin's 72 counties are the fastest growing counties projected through the year 2035. The fastest growing county is St. Croix County at 134%, and in fact, 3 of the fastest growing counties are in the far western part of the state. So UW River Falls is right on the line between 1 and 4, Pierce and St. Croix counties, and I'll speak in a little while about our Learning Center in Hudson, which is in St. Croix County. All of this is to say that this is the context in which our campus operates, and I really believe that that part of our state is a very important part of Wisconsin's economic future, and I think it's something that we need to understand as a state. Next, some information on who we serve, because who our students are matters very much as we think about student success and degree attainment. Here's some information. Our enrollment is now approximately 6,500 students. 37% of our students are residential. They live on campus. Our average ACT this fall was 22.5. 44% of our undergraduate students were first-generation students. So not quite to the extent as UW Parkside, but we also are a place of opportunity that serves large numbers of first-generation students. I would characterize our students as being earnest. Many of them hold part-time jobs. College is a new experience in many cases for them and their families. They come to us from small towns, dairy farms, and as well as some of the less affluent areas of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. Our undergraduate enrollment in terms of underrepresented minority students has been growing from about 4% in 2007 now to about 6% this past fall. I also share with you some information on our majors. Our largest major at UW River Falls is business administration, followed by animal science, and that would include our dairy science program and biology. I mentioned earlier that our students are from relatively families of modest means. I think this is an interesting piece of data. Unfortunately, it is somewhat dated to 2006. I have not been able to find more recent data. But if you look at institutions in the UW system, this is a representation of median family income for various institutions. And so you can see a very significant range of the economic status of our students and UW River Falls is second to the lowest in terms of Wisconsin students for family income. I will mention the lowest actually is UW Superior. So these are the students that we serve. I want to switch and give you a little bit of information on important goals and trends for institution. The first shows undergraduate degrees conferred goals versus our performance in terms of how we're doing. First, the blue bars show you data on the number of baccalaureate degrees conferred, and also shows you the plan that we have for UW River Falls through the year 2025. Last year, we graduated our largest class in our history. Actually, it was about 300 students larger than any other time in our history. We conferred 1,249 degrees, and that was about 100 above what is planned in our More Graduates for Wisconsin goal in terms of degrees conferred. So we see over time a fairly ambitious projection for UW River Falls. We need to accomplish that by a number of means. One is to work on our retention and graduation rates, but also I think factored in is this long-term view of far western Wisconsin and the projected growth in that part of our state. Here I'm showing 4- and 6-year graduation rates. Now this is for new freshmen entering full-time in the fall. We are certainly falling short at this point in terms of our 6-year graduation rate and doing relatively as planned in our 4-year graduation rates. On the 4-year rate, which is shown in blue, we're ahead by about 1.9%. On the 6-year rate, we're below by about 4%. And this is the same information for transfer students. So that is some of our core data and the goals that we have. I want to spend quite a bit of my time today talking about what we're doing to try to address these challenges. So I'd like to share with you some initiatives, and I think like any chancellor, there are many, many things that we're doing that I could talk about today, but I'm going to focus on several areas, high-impact practices, a couple that we're really focusing on at River Falls. Our UW River Falls Hudson Center to serve new populations of learners, and then our fundraising efforts related to Falcon Scholars and raising money for need-based scholarships. You're probably familiar with the term high-impact practices, which really are a set of effective educational practices that, based on a growing body of research, really enhance student success. Student success meaning higher rates of retention and graduation, increased academic challenge and achievement, greater engagement by students, especially with faculty, and also helping them develop the skills and perspectives that will help them with employment as well as pursuing graduate and professional schools. This set of high-impact practices, which is a phrase coined by Dr. George Koo, includes these 10 educational practices. As you look down this list, I think it's fair to say that all institutions in the system are pursuing many of these to a very significant degree. They speak to the quality of the degree that we grant. We want to grant a degree with integrity, but they also speak as important tools for enhancing retention and graduation rates. The two that I'm going to focus on this morning for UW River Falls include undergraduate research and learning communities. I did speak to the board several months ago about undergraduate research, so I won't spend a great deal of time on it other than to say that this is a historic strength and a very strategic priority for our campus. Last year we developed a new 5-year strategic plan with 3 goals, and within one of those goals is a specific aspiration to become a national leader in terms of collaborative and undergraduate research. Why? We believe because we do it well, we can do it better, but it has a tremendous impact on our students. And so we're placing a strong focus on this activity, a key element of our strategic plan. Several years ago, the board approved, after Student Senate approved, a proposal for a differential tuition. We still have a relatively modest differential tuition compared to other institutions, but part of that was to provide student resources to support undergraduate research across a range of disciplines. And we're now in year 3 of that Falcon Promise, and we're able to offer significant numbers of student stipends, support for projects, and even faculty support to engage students in undergraduate research. Yesterday, in fact, on campus, we opened a new center for undergraduate research, scholarly, and creative activity on our campus. So we now have a place that is a resource for students and our faculty. A little bit of data based on the National Survey of Student Engagement. One of the questions on the NSSE is to ask seniors, have you or do you plan to participate in research with faculty? You see the data for UW River Falls. We do somewhat better in the 11-12 year compared to the national average, and significantly better compared to the master's institutions that are part of that survey. Our aspiration, our goal is to increase that percent to 42 and 44% by the year 2015-16. The idea is we want to engage our students in meaningful experiences, and that will be one tool to use to improve our retention and graduation rates. The other high-impact practice I'll touch on is living and learning communities. This is where a community of students, typically a group of, say, 25 or 50, live as a cohort in a residence hall, and they also take one or more classes together. The idea is to connect their living and learning experience, to blur the lines between those two, and there are often activities in the residence hall that connect the classes that they take to the place where they live. Now, this involves, of course, living in a residence hall. And I want to make David Miller nervous and say, this is one of our residence halls that didn't go through the State Building Commission. No, in fact, it's from the University of Oxford, which was one of the pioneers in living learning communities. A very interesting model. Oxford, as you may know, is actually a confederation of about 40 colleges, and it's based on this residential college model. They offer their own tutoring, dining, social events. They all admit their own students. And this is a Keble College, incidentally, at Oxford. By the way, that college, each college is governed by a warden. So maybe there's something we can use there. This is a UW River Falls living and learning community, McMillan Hall. And we have been doing this for a number of years. Great work by our student affairs staff and our faculty in building these learning communities. And at this point, we have 5 living learning communities, and this demonstrates the theme of each of those. And in many cases, specific majors, students with majors, are connected through these living and learning communities. As an example, the Taking Care of Business living learning community involves students majoring in business computer science related disciplines. So they live in the same residence hall, in this case, Grimm Hall, and they take some of the same classes together, including in the fall business, economics, business communications, and in the spring, together they take English, computer science, and economics. So they have a peer group, and they're connected not only where they live, but where they attend class and how they learn. We've had some promising data in that regard. This is a comparison for fall 09, 10, and 11. The comparison is the first to second year retention rate for all students living in residence hall. Those would be the black bars. And then students that are engaged in these living learning communities. And as you see, we're seeing a significant improvement in first and second year retention for the living learning communities. And it's something that we want to build upon. And, you know, it makes a lot of sense. The more we can engage students with their peers, with their faculty, with their academics, the more likely they are to be retained. The other initiative I want to talk about is the UW River Falls Hudson Center. And a few of the regions have had the opportunity to visit this center. In terms of geography, it's interesting. Hudson is only about 8 miles from River Falls. But in one way, it's in a very different world because its proximity to I-94. This learning center was opened in fall of 2010, and I appreciate the support of President Riley and UW System in this initiative. And the primary goal is to serve adult learners, including with baccalaureate degree completion programs. So this was very much a new venture for us. We've been a very traditional campus since our inception. And this was a bit of a risk, if you will, but one that has turned out, I think, to be quite successful. We do offer our MBA program there, but today I want to focus on the Adult Degree Completion Program, which is a Bachelor of Science program in Business Administration. Yesterday I was speaking with the director of this program, Mike Bilden. He tells me we now have 93 students in the Adult Degree Completion Program. This space, which is lease space in Hudson, is about a half mile off I-94. We have 3 classrooms. We opened a 4th in January because of the demand. It has convenient parking, good access to the interstate, amenities, coffee shop, easy walking distance. And I think a key statistic is the following. As we think about meeting our goals as a system and who we serve, within a 5-mile radius of the Hudson Center, there are 6,000 citizens, 25 years or older, that have some college but not a college degree. So you think about what happens to all these students we see in the bar graphs that aren't retained. They're out there, and many of them are now 22 or 24 years old. And so the enrollment at the Hudson Center has grown in the first year from 241 to now 412. A little more about this Adult Degree Completion Program. The location matters, the convenience matters. Most of these classes are in the evening, but also the model of support and advising matters. We have a single advisor model. So there's an individual who does a tremendous job that talks to prospective students, recruits them, sits down with them, looks at their past academic records, encourages them to think about how they transfer credits, assists them with that process. It's a very intrusive advising process, provides opportunity for prior learning assessment, and this, I think, has made a significant difference in recruiting, but also retaining those students. And that, by the way, is a billboard you'll see on I-94 advertising our Adult Degree Completion Program. So who are these students that we're serving at the Hudson Center? Let me give you a few statistics. I mentioned we now have 93 students in the Adult Degree Completion Program. Their average age, 41 years old. 78% are from Wisconsin residents. 49% first-generation students, 60% female, 15% veterans. Many of them bring in credits from different institutions. In fact, those 93 students are bringing in credits from 66 different institutions. Many technical colleges, community colleges, also some from the University of Phoenix and Ukraine University. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done by the advisor to help them fit what they've done with where they want to go. In May, we believe we'll graduate 17 of these adult degree completion students. This, by the way, is Kathy Early. She spoke at our opening of our 4th classroom at the Hudson Center 2 months ago. Appreciate Regent Tyler, Senator Harsdorf for their attendance. She lives in New Richmond, Wisconsin. She works in Woodbury, Minnesota. She attended a number of institutions, including River Falls in the 1980s. Now she's coming back, and she will complete her degree. Related, the board approved several months ago a Bachelor of Applied Science degree to be offered by UW River Falls. This is intentionally designed also to serve non-traditional adult students, in many cases students who have attended or have a degree from a technical college. So one of the focal points or tracks in that program is computer science. We work very closely with WITC as well as Chippewa Valley Technical College to build the articulation agreements and pathways for students in the region. In this case, the AAS degrees you see here are offered by Wisconsin Indian Head Technical College that will articulate well into a degree completion, a BAS degree in computer science. We're recruiting for the fall semester, and by 2018 our projection is to have 90 students in the BAS, graduating about 35 students each year. The final initiative I'll mention is to focus some of our fundraising efforts on need-based scholarships. As you've seen, we serve students from modest means, and those financial resources make a great difference. We offer certainly scholarships from our foundation, but really very few that have need-based as a principal component. We seek to increase that over the next several years from a modest $68,000 up to about $310,000. This is part of our strategic plan goal, and we recently launched our first ever comprehensive fundraising campaign. This is a centerpiece of that. Also, you recall when I spoke to the board several months ago, I talked about the Falcon Scholars Challenge, which is offering 4-year, $1,000 per year scholarships from donated funds to incoming students, and $2,000 from our students through differential tuition to have those students study abroad or do research their junior or senior year. So a very unique partnership between our students and our alumni and friends. Our goal is to support 80 new freshmen each year having high financial need and high potential for success. And I mentioned a few months ago the tremendous gift from Arlen and Marilyn Albright, and Marilyn receiving the first scholarship we ever offered in 1954, a photograph on our right. So we need to raise $800,000 by the year 2016. We're doing very well. We've raised $645,000 to date. And because of that success this fall, we launched the program and welcomed our first class of 80 Falcon Scholars to campus. Part of this effort is we're doing an annual fundraiser for Falcon Scholars. Last year we raised $183,000. On April 19th of this year we have a guest speaker, a guy named Bart Starr, and tickets are selling briskly. Again, the focus is on students and raising money to help support making the UW River Falls education affordable. So I will close by a few opportunities and threats. Certainly looking long-term, our location in the dynamic, growing St. Croix Valley is, I think, a tremendous asset and an opportunity. I go back to this idea that I believe that that westernmost part of our state is a huge part of our state's economic future, and that's where we are. Further expansion of serving adult learners in terms of location, delivery. I think we've had some success, and we need to think longer term. What does that look like 5 or 10 or 20 years from now? Certainly a global focus. That's a critical part of our new strategic plan. We're doing a great deal to encourage students to study abroad, an example of a high-impact practice. And we certainly have opportunities to recruit additional international students, and we're working on that. Some of the threats, even in western and west central Wisconsin, over the next several years, the number of high school graduates is declining. And so short term, we still face that and a very competitive market. If you drive around the Twin Cities, you see billboards not only from UW institutions, but from University of North Dakota, Iowa State University. It's a very competitive market in that region. Retention of the student body, really a challenge. Serving students who have vulnerability to the economy and financial aid. And then resources, including supporting our faculty and staff, recruiting, retaining excellent faculty and staff, to support some of the intrusive retention efforts that really make a difference. Things like high-impact practices, they're not inexpensive. They require resources, and that is certainly a challenge. So with that, I'll wrap up my presentation and see if there are any questions before I turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Ray Cross.
Chancellor Cross. Remind me, Dean, how many Minnesota students, the percentage of?
We have about 48% students from Minnesota. So that reciprocity agreement has a huge impact on our campus. Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Can I follow up on that?
Sure.
Because that's what I was going to ask, but I also want to know if you factor in the average family income of the Minnesota student, what's the average family income on campus?
Yeah, we don't have that data, but we've asked that question, and we think it would increase it a bit, but not very much. Many of our students of color, large majority, come from Minneapolis, St. Paul, and many of them come from families that are economically challenged. And so at first you might think, well, that would really make a difference, but I think it would be similar, maybe a bit higher for our Minnesota students, not much, because they pay essentially the same tuition as Wisconsin students.
If I can follow up one more time.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
What percentage of students on your campus are Hmong?
Actually have that. So We have, this is fall semester students enrolled, 115 students from Southeast Asia. So it's hard to sort that out, but we've seen a growing Hmong population, not only from the cities, but also from central Wisconsin. So that is a significant part of the growth we've seen in students of color.
Thank you.
Yep.
Regent Whitburn?
Your work at Hudson, getting after those that have had previously partial higher education in their background is impressive. That being said, are you and your staff and faculty looking at upcoming participation in the Flex Degree program? Is that on your screen?
It's on our screen. I don't think we're ready to pull that trigger yet. But yes, that would make sense for us to look at. The other part of it that I wanted to mention, because if you listen to what I've said, it would seem like everyone is in the classroom in that program. Many of those students also take online courses. So using technology, we actually had a couple that was in the program moved to California, but because of this relationship with our advisor, they're actually completing their degree online with River Falls and other higher ed online programs. So, but I mean, of course, the Flex Degree option is something we will look at.
Dean, is your campus doing anything with the Native Americans and with the tribal councils or anything to...
You know, we do have a connection to Lakota Ray, and so we recruit students from there. The numbers, and I'll give those to you, are relatively modest in terms of Native American students. 19, so it's a small number. Again, most of our students are from the cities, growing populations among students. Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you, Dean.
Okay. Thank you.
As you can see, I have a lot to say, Will. Well, thank you. I don't have as many slides, and I have a couple of key points I want to make, so I'll try to make this entertaining as well. You saw this slide already, and I want to expose you to it again, because I'm actually quite proud of that slide, and one of the reasons I am is statistically there's no difference here, and that's an important distinction, and I think that says a lot about what kind of an experience students get at the UW colleges. And I'll jump back over that, but we're actually very proud of that, so I'll stall on that a moment. This is our plan, and it was an aggressive plan that was laid out by my predecessor, who left me with it. So I'm not sure I would have been as aggressive in the plan as he was. Nevertheless, okay, we're going to do our best to meet this. And we're ahead of it so far, as you can see. So the two lines there are distinctive lines between associate and the additional bachelor's degrees we're anticipating granting with the new BAAS. So this new degree, of course, was just announced. We're roughly 120 or so over. Can we maintain that? Can we continue that? We got some threats to that, so I'll share some of those with you. This is one of them. Our retention rates last year fell some, as you can see here. We're down a little bit, and that concerns us, and I'll share with you some of the things we're doing to make that back up where we think it should be. Now, retention and actual enrollment go together. So part of our strategy is incorporated in what we're calling an I plan, and that's a variation of Apple's terminology. In that plan, we have a number of things, and I don't want to repeat some of the things that both Debbie and Dean have said, but high-impact practices include a lot of pieces, including an early intervention program. And you heard the word, I think Dean used the word an intrusive program, and we've used the word intrusive advising. And I first got exposed to intrusive terminology way back when I was a faculty member. And I remember being asked, as we were given some training in intrusive advising, and one of the things I had to do when a student didn't show up to one of my classes was actually go over the dorm, go to his room, knock on the door, and he came to the door, scared the bejeebers out of him. Well, probably for a lot of reasons. But part of that intrusive effort is what we're talking about, intrusive activity, and you're seeing it in a much more polite way today, but interfering in their lives in a way that captures their attention. And that's an important part of any high-impact practice.
These do not include transfers out.
Transfers in. So these are new freshmen entering only.
Yeah, and in the second year, I'm at Marathon campus, I go to Madison. You're not showing them out.
Right.
You are showing them.
No, it's not showing them out.
They're just going off the screen.
This is only if you're still there fall of the second year. So if it's fall to fall comparison for new freshmen only.
So if I've done there 1 year and I go to Madison.
Not here.
Not here. Which gets to a question: is there any way that we can track the role of the UW colleges in providing an entry point for students who ultimately go to one of the comprehensive schools?
Yes, and I think if you go back to this point here, whoops.
That's when you wanted us to linger on that slide.
Yeah, this kind of success rate, regardless of where they leave, is very good. One of the things I want to point out is we probably are, to Regent Bradley's point, we're probably an anomaly, a very different institution within the system. And we're often compared to community colleges around the country. Who are our peers? Who might we compare ourselves with? We don't fit a traditional community college unless you isolate transfer students only. So what I like to say is we are the University of Wisconsin in your community, 13 different communities around the state. We are the third largest institution within the university by enrollment. This is a big operation, and this is a wonderful approach to providing affordability and accessibility. And I'm going to speak to that in just a moment when I talk about the opportunities. Retention rate and headcount. Now, these are related. Obviously, if our headcount drops, some of it's attributed to our inability to retain. So what are we doing about this drop in our headcount? Remember, the I plan includes both an effort to reach out for new students and an effort to retain existing students. And there are all kinds of things in there in addition to intervention techniques. One of those pieces is an aggressive communications effort. Students who make contact with our institution are aggressively communicated with in a comprehensive, meaningful way that's interconnected. We've changed the enrollment cycle. We've done some things related to orientation sessions. And our whole I-Plan is an integrated plan where it's owned by everybody. And I believe Dean mentioned that kind of approach too. We all have to own this. If you look at this with respect to underrepresented minorities, this is a 5-year. Whoops, this piece right here is a 5-year average, and this is in the last couple of years. So we're doing a much better job of retaining most categories. There's an exception, but we're still somewhere between 4 and 8% in a gap, and that's our goal, is to close that gap, and that's an important piece for us. So what might our opportunities, our challenges be But obviously, cost is important to us. When we increased our tuition 5.5% last year, we saw an immediate drop in enrollment. And you can go back several years whenever you've seen that. When that's happened, there's an immediate drop in enrollment. Now, that's understandable when you think about the kind of students we enroll, as Dean suggested, the family income on average family income. What I do want to say, we are the lowest tuition in the institution. That happened before I got here, and it's because of my colleagues here from my peer institutions throughout the system who said, yes, we'll work with you to try to keep your tuition lower. It's to their credit and to Kevin's credit to allow us to do that. And I think that's an important point. We are an access point, and one of those things that is critical to access is affordability. Changing demographics, I could go on here. I think you understand that. What we do know from the Western Interstate Higher Ed Commission is that between the years 2010 and 2015, Wisconsin will have 6.3% fewer high school graduates in that 5-year period. And we can see that playing out. Does that contribute to some of our enrollment issues? Certainly. But I want to spend a couple of minutes on these two items here, both first-generation students and increasing number of part-time students. And what are we doing about that? Obviously, faculty salaries. When you saw the slide earlier that the University of Wisconsin is roughly 18% below national averages, the colleges is roughly 18 to 20%, depending on rank, 18 to 20% lower than that. So this is an important factor for us, and we have to work on that. There is obviously an increasing need for remedial work, but that's what we're good at. We want to own this, and I'll spend a few minutes talking about that later. And of course, increasing competition. All of us know about the increasing private kinds of institutions around us. As it relates to part-time status, why is this important? Take a look at Madison. Madison has roughly 0.2% part-time students. Milwaukee, about 2.3%. We have about 13.5. When you look at this on a scale, we're an outlier in this process. And if you think about that for a minute, students who go to college full-time are 300% more likely to graduate than those who attend part-time. So will that affect our graduation rates? If we're not aggressively dealing with that, you bet it will. The other point is first generation in college. Parents did not attend or did not graduate, I think is the way we count it here. Milwaukee has about 49.2%, and I believe Parkside is really close to that. It's right in that range. About 61% of our students come from families where those families were not in college before. That's a big factor. That has a huge influence and are much more likely to drop out. We have to be particularly aggressive for that group of students. About 1 in 5 of all students within the system that are first time in any college are enrolled in a UW college. So what are our opportunities? And I'm not going to talk about these much. The flex option, the colleges are jumping all over this, and we believe this is a huge opportunity for us, and we're being very aggressive. The foundational, we even are going to be offering a chemistry lab course via the flex option. Makes me a little nervous, to tell you the truth. We'll be shipping kids chemicals. Not sure I want to go there, but that's the BAS degree completion program that we're starting. The technical college partnerships. We have a tremendous opportunity, and we have to overcome some barriers, some historical barriers that are more emotional than they are real. And trying to figure out a way to navigate through that is going to be important. This college option programs, earlier I think Regent Milner talked about what are we doing to capture more of our high school graduates. dual enrollment in the state of Minnesota, the post-secondary enrollment option enrolls about 28,000 high school students. The youth options program in this state is somewhere less than 5,000, and if you combine the work that Oshkosh is doing, which is they're leading the state in that effort, we're probably close to 6,000, maybe 6,500. That's a huge opportunity. And it's something we're being very aggressive about, trying to create a systematic approach so that it isn't just the colleges, but it's partnering with UW-Oshkosh. They have an accredited program, and a few other institutions. I know Whitewater's interested in Green Bay. Can we become more aggressive? Because if we're providing some coursework in the high school and doing it in a quality way, we know we'll have an impact on the percentage of students who end up attending this institution. International students, we've made a huge effort. And two-year colleges do not sell well in the international market, particularly in Asia. They just are an unknown entity. So we have to build awareness there, but we are making some great strides. And of course, remedial expertise, we're working with Mike Lovell and the UW Milwaukee program to try to find a way to partner with them. We have done some flipped classrooms as it relates to math. Early reviews are incredibly positive, so I don't want to get out in front of this and then regret that I've said it, but I think we're doing some things that are groundbreaking when it comes to remedial work and our success in that area. And part of it's because of the way our faculty teach that and the approaches we're taking. And of course, I strongly believe in the importance of building business partnerships, and we're trying to be very aggressive about that.
Questions for, thank you, Ray. Questions for Chancellor Cross? Mike.
Could you answer the question I asked Mark, and I don't remember what I asked? And he said you would answer? Actually, I do remember, if you want me to repeat it.
Please.
The percent of UW college students that do not finish in the two-year colleges that go on to a degree in a comprehensive, a 4 or 6 year. Just that piece alone, there's probably more than that. Do you know?
No. Next question. I think.
For two.
I'm
glad I deferred.
Yes, thank you.
We have some general ideas, but to give you an exact number, we know that the number of those students who do not finish a degree with us, that transfer before even the first year is done, or during the second year before they complete a degree, that number is actually going up. And most of them are transferring to our sister institutions. We also know that increasingly the transfer receiving institutions are changing some of the requirements. So they need to get courses in the sophomore year, and so they're saying to students in particular in I think it's geography, hey, we need you in the sophomore year, so we're losing those students who want those majors because they want to transfer. So that I don't know the exact number, and it's really hard to follow. And I think actually Mark would be the best person to ask.
Good referral. Mark Bradley.
Chancellor, while everybody else was socializing last night, Regent Tyler and I were having a serious conversation about the college option program. So in Minnesota is 4 or 5 times more successful at that than we are, apparently. Do you know who is covering the cost of that program in Minnesota? Is it the state?
Yeah.
Or is it not the state?
Now the state. Originally, it was the school districts. When it was originally set up, the school districts paid for the dual enrollment courses and for the youth options courses. The state has now put together I believe it's a $2 million per year budget, so that any college that offers a dual enrollment and has students enrolled in that gets $150 per student. So they've put up a chunk of money to finance this and take it off the backs of the the school districts and also take it out of the pockets of, take it off the backs of the colleges and universities.
So Minnesota was much more successful even when the school districts paid it?
Much more successful in the school districts than what we're doing, yes.
Although in the beginning it was the financial aid from the state for the school district per student was transferred over to the university, and that really irritated a lot of school districts. So since then, a portion of that remains with the school district because they're having to defend, hey, we've got this capital, whether this student, these assets, whether this student attends or not. And as Mark said, it is such a popular program in Minnesota, I would dare any politician to attempt to eliminate it because it's really popular.
Are we talking about, I'm confused over the answers. Were you talking about Minnesota?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right.
Yeah. And,
Go ahead.
Regent Tyler.
Yeah, I'd just like to provide a commentary on this. I know we oftentimes get confused between dual enrollment and youth options, and youth options in Wisconsin, the school district, whether it's technical colleges or the university, is required to pay for a student to attend. But what we're seeing is a huge rollout of dual enrollment where you attend a class typically delivered in the high school by a high school teacher who is dual credentialed at the technical college, teaching the technical college curriculum, and there is no tuition cost, and they earn credit on both sides. You know, I think this is something we have to look at and address, because one of the programs that our company's involved with, once we hit scale on that, we're going to provide the students enrolled in that pathway 16 credits that they don't pay tuition for at the technical. It's a half a year that the parent doesn't have to pay for. It's a half a year that the student doesn't have to attend, and that's gonna spread like wildfire. And if we're not on board with that, I think that certainly I support it, because we have this large group of students that aren't making a choice, either technical colleges or the university, and we need more to go to higher education. But this is a pathway that's going to be created, and I think if we're not on board with something similar, we're going to lose a lot of students.
we do have similar programs. The CAP program at Oshkosh is exactly that way. There is cost to it. And the big growth in the Minnesota system, in the state of Minnesota, in their dual enrollment is exactly that kind of program. And again, the school district was funding it, paying all the costs when the 4 years trained that high school teacher to offer the 4-year course, the course from at the university level. When they were putting materials out there, all of those costs were being covered by the school district, and there was a compensation actually flowing to the universities to cover those costs. We're running it the same way here, except the student pays those costs. And that's one of the things that we're working on, is how do you scale this up? And Tony Evers' real push within DPI is to make sure that right now that we can pull that in so that students aren't paying for it out of their pocket, that the funds to run that program, the revenue that's needed to keep it running is there, but it doesn't come out of out-of-pocket expenses for a student. If it does, we've got a difference in who can attend. The people that can afford it can be there, and the people that can't aren't going to be there.
Gina?
And there's two sides to the cost. There are two sides to the cost of education: the cost of education for us as a system institution, and the cost of education for the taxpayers and the families in our state. And as we look at this going forward, there are financial implications to higher education for families with respect to dual enrollment. It has the opportunity to have that per cost credit, that per cost lesson, the time lesson, and time to degree, all of which has real financial implications for all of higher education, and it's something that we have to pay attention to.
May I have 3 comments to that?
Sure.
First, quality is really important. In New York, Corning Community College accelerated aggressively a dual enrollment program. And after a few years, Cornell said, we're no longer going to accept those credits. And it killed the program. And so quality is really important. And that's one of the reasons that it's important to build off from Oshkosh's CAP program and their accredited program, because that's a critical part of this. Secondly, every high school graduate in the United States, 41% of those nationwide need at least one remedial course in college. That's not true in Wisconsin, but nationwide, 41%. So you also have a percentage, you have this bifurcated problem in high school, because you have a percentage of seniors who feel like they're wasting their time, they're bored, and then you have this group that aren't really ready for college. Can we have an impact on high schools by helping to deal with this side so they can shift resources? And I think that's a serious challenge for us to deal with. The third part of this is, all of this, Mark said there's no tuition, Regent Tyler said there's no tuition, but there's still a cost. And who's paying for it is your point. And what we know is that students who take dual enrollment in high school do not shorten, on average, do not shorten their 4-year experience. You would think it would. What happens is they tend to be the better students who dual major, add a minor, do a number of other things, so it doesn't necessarily shorten the degree. It enriches their experience.
Yeah, I know Mark wants to come on and sum up and take us back to where we started. Thanks a lot, Ray. Great presentation by all of our chancellors. We really appreciate it. I was saying to the president of the board, I think this discussion this morning has been one of the best I've seen in my time as president of the board, interacting with some hard data, getting at some of the really big questions and issues that we face together. Before I turn it back over to Mark to summarize, and he'll go back to kind of where we started, are we on track in the growth agenda? Do we want to keep those goals? Do we need to make adjustments? Where will we be in a few years, do we think? But one further perspective on that, the growth agenda is about adding 80,000 additional graduates by 2025. It's about graduates, degrees, right? Another thing we know, and this is national data, is that if you have 1 year's worth of college credit, your salary on average will be higher than somebody who has only a high school diploma. If you have 2 years of college credit, your salary will be higher on average than somebody who has 1 year of college credit. There's a lot of talk now in the jobs preparation world and the workforce development world about stackable credentials, right, or badges, things that are short of a degree that can somehow be recognized, that people hope will have a positive effect for individuals in getting and retaining jobs and in their contributions to the workforce and the society. Ironically enough, we've already got a kind of stackable credential thing going on, because you can stack those higher incomes higher and higher based on how many credits you have, even if you don't have a degree. So somebody who does get some college credit never winds up coming back, and we're trying to get more of them too, because that is better, but still has a couple years of college, is making more money on average and probably making a bigger contribution to the society than somebody who doesn't. Just another interesting way of saying there are almost no absolutes in this. I mean, having a college degree is absolutely better than not having one, but having some credit short of that is also relatively better than having only a high school diploma.
Yep. Thank you, Kevin. So, let me try to tie this up and bring it together in the whole. First of all, should we be on our goals? Should we continue with this goal? And let's just recap the number. Looking first at our equity gaps. We aren't doing as well overall as we'd like to, but a lot of that has been tied, some of that can be tied to the economy, especially when we look at the Pell-eligible students. We saw last month that the real decline here occurred really in the last 2 years, that there was a decline in the retention rates and the graduation rates for those students that started back in 07 and 08 and got hit by this economic downturn. It didn't hit and impact our underrepresented minority students in the same way. For the most part, our underrepresented minority students, that gap is closing, but not closing at a rate fast enough that we will hit our mark by 2015, with the exception, I think, of the freshman retention rate. It's on track. Six-year graduation grad rate is decreasing, but if it's gone 2 percentage points in 3 years, and we've got 3 more years, and we've got to get down to 11%, we're not going to make it. We've got some work to do. So we've got some work to do in our equity gaps, both with the underrepresented minorities and with our low-income students. Looking at the other goals, the degrees conferred, retention rate, the vital signs, including retention rate, graduation rates, we're looking pretty good. We're on track to meet our goals. It certainly isn't a time to pull back from those. But I do want to go back to this point I made about 4-year graduation rate and look at that 4-year graduation rate here, that we're up 3 percentage points above our target. So I mentioned the universities, it looks like when we compare to our national averages, we could do better. We have a little bit of history here. In the last 5 years, we've had 2 institutions that have dramatically improved their 4-year graduation rates. 2 institutions. They've improved them by 5 percentage points and 6 percentage points respectively. They're Madison and they're Eau Claire. Both have had large differential tuition increases focused on improving student quality. The other institutions haven't made that kind of an investment. It's clear that moving these 4-year retention rates can be done, but we've been able to do it through increased revenue. Those 2 institutions have done it with an investment. In essence, supplementing the standard tuition and the state appropriation by additional tuition from students. So can we move that number in 4-year graduation rate? Yes, but it does take resources to do it. We can't just say it's going to happen and magically make that the case. So in the end, can we make our goals? Yes, and what will it take? First of all, we've got to address quality. We really are past the tipping point when it comes to faculty salaries. I think all of it, we've heard that all year. We understand that. We certainly have to do something to start to eat away at that 18% difference between peers and our faculty and staff pay. We do have some places where we can improve some efficiencies. That 4-year graduation rate, retention rates can go up a little bit. 6-year graduation rates on some of our campuses, institutions can improve. But to do all of this, we're going to need an increased investment in resources. Many of the programs and plans that you have heard talked about by the chancellors that are in these plans to get us to this point, and certainly to get us to 2015 and 2025, were based on new programs, some of which have been implemented, but only some of which have been implemented by repooling resources, redistributing those resources, making priority choices. We can't hit these numbers if we don't have an investment and continue to be able to put good, high-quality programs in place, hire the faculty and the staff that are needed to be able to operate those programs at the level that we've been able to. I think the thing that scares me the most is to look back to what happened before 2004. We were able to bring in faculty at good faculty salaries. We were able to beat the average benefits of our peers. We can no longer do that. Our benefits are like everyone else's, and our salaries are 18 to 20% below. It's the people that create these programs. It's the people that make the programs work. And if we don't have new, high-quality people coming in, we're going to have a lot of trouble making these goals. And we're going to need the investment, not just in the people, but to be able to put and construct some of these new high-impact practices, some of the new programs that are proven to improve retention rate, improve those graduation rates. So I think what I've seen with the budget proposal, we're in a good shape to make some of those gains and be able to do some of that. And we'll hear a little bit more about the budget this afternoon. So thank you very much for your time. I do want to thank the 3 chancellors in particular for their participation, but all of the chancellors and provosts for helping us reach these numbers. We wouldn't be in this shape without what the chancellors have done, what the provosts have done, working with their faculty, and then the commitment from the faculty and staff on our institutions. So
additional questions or comments on Mark's conclusion here?
Well done.
Before we thank you, Mark, dive into the box of our box lunches, I just wanted to make a quick introduction. I wanted to extend a welcome to Brooke Froelich from Senator Harsdorf's office, who's over there with Jess. Welcome. Brooke, as you know, Senator Harsdorf is a member of the Joint Committee on Finance this year, and she's also the chair of the Senate's Committee on Universities and Technical Colleges. Brooke is staffing the Joint Finance Committee for Senator Harsdorf, and so we're very pleased that you could join us this afternoon. So welcome, Brooke. Thanks for being here.
All right. With that, we'll head to lunch. Try in about a half an hour. We're probably a little late, but let's try to keep it before 1. Right.